Hanif, our Chief Technology Officer. Raja has gone back to see his new wife. Right? Yeah, he's. Yeah, I mean, not new wife. A wife who just got married. Recently married.
Last year.
Last year, right? So he's on his way back. So he's happily waiting to get home there. Where Kailai, Wan Kun, Kailai Allen, Wan Kun Eugene, and Chang, all the way from North Korea. Ipoh from Ipoh, and Mutadi, and from his luxurious yacht. Jet ski, right? Yeah. And you guys, I really encourage you just to go and see that. It's called straight ski. Straight ski. Before you reach Batu Ferringhi, it's on the way to Batu Ferringhi.
Yeah,
Not too far away. Okay.
My condo was luxury.
Oh, the condo is so luxurious.
I said Torini.
Alright, I don't think so. Sounds luxurious. Yeah. So today we have important presentations. Two important presentations. One is from Chang, Chang Yichang, who has come a long way and have completed the data collection. Now it's about to prepare for findings presentation, which also called research progress presentation to the Samples Committee. Right? And we have Kaila, who has just started the process. I have forced Kaila to present because and Kaila said, "You're nervous. That's good because you want to practice to be able to present even though you're nervous." That is an important thing. Now, just to quick note, I have one of my students who have presented many times, right? But during the Viva, she went. She was completely off. I mean, her papers are all the Dina, all papers are all over the place. Then the examiner asked, "What's your research questions?" She can't even answer what your research questions are. What's your problem? She can't even answer the question. You know what? The main finders can't even answer the question. She was really panicking. But thank God, she has a very strong thesis. Right? I thought at that time, oh God, this is the worst case scenario, man. It's the worst case scenario. She has a new laptop and the laptop doesn't function. All right, worst case scenario. Thank God at that time, her thesis is strong. It's a miracle. Her thesis is recommended to be nominated to be the best thesis. She went in with a strong thesis, so that helped her. So the point I want to raise is you want to have many multiple practices before presentations, presentation before the actual one. Right? The actual one is really the Viva. The Viva is the actual one, right? Not only you nervous, I'm also nervous at that time. I usually pray for my students. Really, I will pray for my students. I will pray for them. I pray hajat, sunatan hajat, my student, so that everything's smooth sailing. So that's why it's important to start having multiple presentations as early as possible, so that I know after a while you know your stuff very well because you have been presenting, you have been able to communicate it and all that. So that's the crucial thing about the whole idea of having group supervision. But group supervision is safe because it's just among ourselves, right? Yeah. So we don't have a separate thing there. Just me there and your friends. So we're gonna start with highlight. So start with Chang. So Chang, the floor is yours.
Okay,
Right?
thanks. Okay, afternoon, Prof.
Oh, sorry. I want to make a very important point. A very important point because I'm in the middle of the important point right now. And that is this. Sorry. Today is what? 17?
17.
All right. Your good friend from Nigeria, who is in our list right now, I don't think he's attending, named Sulaiman. His deadline is 19th. 19th. His candidature will end. Right? He's still processing the forms and all that. Right? So we are helping him. We are helping the process. There's IPS, there's examiners, and all that, right? So and then not only the notice of submission, there are like multiple forms, like I don't know, maybe 8 forms or something like that. There's endorsement. There's the confirmation of receipt of, and then there's the the financial part as well. So I really encourage the last 1 month, right? Be here to process it, and you got to submit the thesis, the complete thesis. The director has to sign all the process, all the forms over you. So if you do not plan to be here in the last 1 month, 1 month meaning you have done your corrections now, all the process. Now it's the last 1 month of completing the whole process. If you do not plan to be here, hire a person to help you to process things, right? If not, get a good friend, make a good friend, get the friend to help you, and treat the friend nasi kandar or some dinner or some buffet. Get the friend to help you. It's important because the last 1 month, if it's not done correctly, you you pass the deadline of candidature. And then there is real problem, real problem, right? So we have several students, like 3 or 4 of them, who have this problem with deadlines. So we do not want to have this problem with deadlines, right? This is 17, right? 19 is the end, right? And 19 is already school holiday.
Oh yeah.
For Malaysia, right? We are ready to go away, go off IPS and all that. So this is really something for you all to remember. The last 1 month, come here, spend time to complete everything. Or minimum 2 weeks, right? To 1 month. If not, get somebody to help you. Really get somebody to help you. Perform. All right, Chang, all right? Floor is yours now.
All right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is my my PhD is actually doing on Malay identity. Okay, Malay identity, and actually it relates to National Museum. Any second slide. Okay. Probably I can stand up, right?
Please, okay, up to you.
Okay.
Whichever you're comfortable.
Okay. For the introduction part, okay. In Malaysia, you actually heard this term. We call it as the Malay Muslim.
Chang, can you go back to your the title again, just to
Okay.
have a quick explanation to your title? Do that.
All right. Okay. Today my research is actually about Malay identity. How actually national museums in Peninsular Malaysia represented and also construct Malay identity in Malaysian framework. Okay. Right.
That's good. With just one sentence or something like that. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Okay, for the introduction part, museum is always actually a microcosm which is a limited space. So when it is come to limited space, it would actually need to repurpose museum displays. So if museum display never been repurposed and reused, it will become rubbish. Okay, rubbish from the ancient empires. Okay, so in this microcosm, so this limited space bring a meaning that you must go through selection, so to keep him in order. So in keeps him in order in an exhibitionary complex, then it involves power. Bring a meaning that the museum display, museum exhibition, and text, museum text description produced in museum is never neutral. It is intended or actually laden with actually power. Okay, so here, after I explain the museum, I would actually see how these artifacts, this visual pictures, text and display can construct or actually represent Malay identity in Malaysia. So as museum is actually, we think that museum is actually things about the past, but museum always actually is a place when it's museum narrative and museum display, it is actually a content for the present and the future use. So museum is actually always for the future. But when it comes to power, what would be the fashion of the power? Some of it can be ethno-nationalism, it can be nationalism, it can be a deconstruct of a resistance, or sometimes it is actually hegemony. Right? Some even argue that it is actually a public sphere to debates in terms of ethnicity. So in my research here, I will concentrate on looking on so-called the Malay identities that represent from actually the museum display its material culture and landed non-material culture behind it. Okay, and next slide, please. Okay, here I would, after the introduction, I go to the problem statement. So the problem statement here is museum. It is always National Museum in Malaysia. We have National Museum funded by the federal government and also funded by the state government. So here I would actually put it in terms on the state-funded museum as actually National Museum. So I'll see how this cultural museum as a cultural institution that produce Malay identity. So I'm not looking at history, but I'm looking in terms on anthropological, sociologically, the historical narrative, and how power construct Malay identity. Okay, so formulation of ethnicity, it is always a dynamic process. Okay, cultural identity, any identity is always a contested idea. So it same goes to Malay identity or Malayness in Malaysia, right? Okay, when come to Malay identity in Malaysia, ethnicity is actually bind with actually local elements. So the local elements that actually represents Malay identities in a museum or actually from Malay ethnicity, it will be the Malay manuscripts, the Kris dagger, okay, wayang kulit public shows, that potential, okay, grabbed by the institutional power to make existence as a symbol or actually a marker of Malayness in Malaysia. So in museum, it is a place that it repurposes the ideas from the ancient regime or the Malay ruler feudal class, but it renews in terms of a meaningful representation that signifies so-called his heritage and traditions. So these old memories that belongs to the Sultanate and the old empires have been actually make it and blend into what we call it as the memories on the Malay ethnicity in the museum. Okay, right. Still on the problem statement. So in Malaysia, contemporary Malaysia nation-state framework nowadays, the so-called Malay is actually bounded by National Cultural Policy 1971. So National Cultural Policy 1971 that defines national culture. The first is Islam as actually absorption of national culture. Second would be the culture on the regional of Nusantara or the Malay archipelago as an absorption of culture. Third, other cultures that can be absorbed into national culture, but it do not actually contradict with Islam as absorption of national culture, right? So this would actually brings to under actually the framework on Malaysia is in terms of Malay Muslim framework. Okay, okay. So in my research program also, I would absorb the idea on because I talked about in a nation-state framework, I would actually labor on a Benedict Anderson's study on print capitalism, or actually how he understands nationalism in terms on the print media, the cultural institutions such as museum, archive, and of course education institutions are actually a network that actually formulate a boundary on a imagined community, or actually how you these symbols commemorating and also captured and be I will not say that to monitor, but actually promote by the nation state to form a boundary, okay, a boundary that we call it as Malayness. Okay, so this is the idea of Benedict Anderson. Okay, with actually invention of tradition, can't remember that scholar Smith was a, okay, inventor of tradition is certain traditions which is so-called authentic, vintage and old, but it is actually something relatively new. Okay, it is something relatively new. In this in this actually key writing, it actually talks about the Scottish Scottish
Quilt.
the Scottish quilt. Thanks.
The skirt lah, the skirt
Yeah,
lah.
the Scottish skirt. It is actually reflects when there's war between Ireland, British. So you grab it actually in terms of, oh, this is actually the culture of Scotland and also the Highlanders. So bring meaning that certain cultural artifacts about so-called the Malayness, it is actually an invention. Okay, for national cultural policy just now, one of the things is the absorption of the national culture. The first one, it includes Malacca. Malacca as actually the center oriented to actually absorption on national culture. Okay, so next. Okay, so that this is the last one for the problem statement. So just now I talked about annexity, I talked about how the dimension of power, and also now I talk about in terms of museum. It is always a interdisciplinary study when it comes to museum. So this actually problem statement, it is actually to prove that archive of archive of historical objects or documentary, it is never something neutral. So the institution itself have the power to privilege and have the power to actually marginalize and neglected. So forgotten and also remembrance is actually a process. Sometimes it actually museum can be used as a tool of hegemon, but certain when we talk about democratization of public sphere by Jagan Habermas, museum can actually be a place of resistance also to actually build so-called multiculturalism, resilience, etc. But here I will actually look at the dynamics and also the discussion of Malay identity, the representation of Malay identity in the research. Okay, so when it comes to Tony Burnett, he actually coined it in his research about museum. He come up with the word so-called museum as actually a exhibitionary display. It is the museum space is actually binded with a disciplinary science or knowledge. All right. Okay. So I'll see how the power plays in a museum and what actually is represented as Malay identity in 14 selected national museums in Malaysia, especially on its artifacts and artifacts display and etc. Okay, Hanif. Okay, from the okay, so the research gap I find here is when I go through journal articles, that's actually a bundle of journals on pelancongan is tourism, education, museum and it as an institution of informal education. But when it comes to debates on multiculturalism, nation state and museum, I would find not many. It is actually one is actually by Cup or another book by Abu Talib, USM professor. So from here, the research gap, I think that this phenomena that relates museum and power need to actually study deepen. So that's the research gap that I find. Okay, so the significance of study is actually an interdisciplinary research that consists Malay identity, representation, museum text, and power in selected national museum in Peninsular Malaysia. Thanks. Okay, from the research problem, I would formulate the research question 1 would tally to research question, the research objective. So first one would be how do national museums in Malaysia portray Malay identities? It brings to examine the portrayal of Malay identities in national museums in Peninsular Malaysia. Second, what are the historical narrative for the Malay identities in museum displays and dioramas of the national museums in Malaysia? Second is to study the historical narrative for the Malay identity in the museum display and diorama of the national museums in Malaysia. Third, what is the typology for alternative discourse? Here, what I mean is actually the local knowledge that represents Malay, or actually in terms on a post-colonial deconstruct framework to see on museum, okay, for the portrayal of Malay identity in the national museums in Malaysia. So the objective would be to construct a typology for an alternative discourse for the portrayals of Malay identity in national museums in Malaysia. Okay, for I use the word theoretical discussion. Okay, so inside the theoretical discussion that I formulated would be, you will have three cores. Okay, this is actually three cores of theoretical discussion. So here, what I mean about power is I read in terms on Foucault, Michel Foucault, right? So for Foucault, power is something that been nominalized. So not coercive power, but it is actually people take it as their word already. People would actually internalize power, and you view it actually something normal. So okay, so and also when come to museum, also when Foucault actually come up with the idea of the orders of things, and inside you have a concept, we have a concept called episteme, bring a meaning that in terms on the spectrum of ideas of the discipline, different era, the social structure have a different idea about what is so-called science last time. So Foucault's idea was how magic being absorbed inside the disciplinary of science, if not mistaken, okay, under the Enlightenment period. But however, from museum politics or the politics of heritage, these are actually the absorption of the idea inside museum. So the Enlightenment and Renaissance museums come to a place that you search for knowledge, you answer how God, okay, God actually gives us these things, and we actually describe, okay, about the nature, etc. But when come to the age of empire, museum try to actually fit in with so-called progress and modernity, which is sometimes very Eurocentric, and the last one is actually scientific racism, and part of our racial thinking also been actually influenced by that. Okay, so it served museum, or actually archive, serve colonial and imperial power. But however, Malaysia as a relatively young nation, we have that independence start from 1957. It is actually, if we take nationalism 1945 as year zero of nationalism, then we actually are on the bandwagon of actually nation building. Museum we talks about on nation building and identity construction. Okay, of course, museum until nowadays it talks about public sphere, the debates of identity, agency, and so-called post-coloniality. So that would be actually on the pillar of power. Second, that is actually when I talk about Malay identity, that's actually frameworks about so-called Malay identity. When it comes to primordial, it will actually thinks that Malay identity is something that static. It is inherent in terms on certain origins. But here I would actually bind it in terms of andaya that Malay annexity, like annexity, the concept of annexity itself, it is actually a very fluid concept. So in how Indonesia defines Malay, how Malaysia defines Malay is actually very different. When Indonesia, you have enriched until the suku bangsa, or actually the sub-ethnic actually the diversity of the sub-ethnic group. Hanif, correct me if I'm wrong. Right. Okay, so that annexity is something social constructed. But however, Malaysia, in terms of the nation state, we always actually buy in terms on the Malay Muslim framework. Okay, so third pillar of theoretical discussion will be actually looking on museum text, how actually the orders of things and also how the idea of the discursive construction on this display, the words used that construct the meaning of Malay. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I have in terms of the time, I have two slides on selected scholarly work. Okay, on actually the scholarly research here, for I cannot pronounce it clear. I cannot pronounce it
Schwartz.
correctly. Swatch. Okay.
Schwartz.
Swatch. Thank you. Okay, Swatch will actually look at the archive. Okay, archive or actually storage. It can be used in terms on the idea of the ruling class and to actually present in terms of hegemony. Okay, Anderson just now would be actually on creating the print capitalism, museum leaflet, museum Facebook, etc. It actually create a boundary of a thinking on thinking Malay and Malayness in a nation state called Malaysia. Okay, Priscilla C will actually see how the ancient monarch or the ancient regime fit in to actually as normalized as a kind of national history and produce national memories.
Just a minute,
Yeah,
just a minute.
okay,
This
sure.
is about our Nigerian brand. Saya komputer saya sebelah saya phone lemah kan. Ya apa dia? Kau sang kat sini boleh tak? Okay, masih aja. Okay, continue.
Next slide. Yeah, next slide. Okay, for identify of the dominant works about Malay, we will actually cite Malay in Anthony Miller on his book The Malay, and also Endaya about actually the Malay. So one is actually Miller talks about that local knowledge of Kerajaan state is still actually remain important in actually the construct of Malay identity. Both of this book, it is actually talking about the evolve of Malay identity throughout actually the spectrum of history until the very current one. Okay, right. For the museum studies, is actually Tony Burnett in actually what he called it as the museum as actually a exhibitionary complex. He talks about museum and power to synthesize what would be the core of their discussion on this scholar. Right. Okay, this is where I'm weak. Okay, so for data collection, this is 14 museums that I gone, and all actually the artifacts of the picture and the description have been taken down. So, and of course, how to actually operate is actually more to qualitative social research method. So qualitative social research method would be much more to the approach of interpretative social non-numerical reasoning. Okay, so for actually here I will actually use inductive reasoning, and in inductive reasoning it starts from data. So from the data it goes to actually theory testing. So I'm testing the literature review and the theory, and I will try to attempt to refine the theory and prove empirically positivism is actually the regularity that empirically these are actually something consistent, so it is actually valid in terms of it is valid when it comes to validity. Okay, so the execution of case study research, I would actually refer to the book of Robert Ying. So Robert Ying on case study, there is exploratory research. There are 4 types, but I will use embedded single case study because it is actually a museum but certain themes I will actually set sub themes. So it is actually embedded single case embedded case study. Later correct me if I'm wrong. Alright, okay. After that, I will actually put into unit of analysis, cutting on the unit analysis, and the measurement tools is actually I go back to so-called the ideal types, or actually the ideal types formulated by themes. Okay, Hanif. Okay, so just now how to actually set theme. These themes is actually go back to research question 1, 2, 3. So these are the themes that actually set by using research question, right? So this is chapter 3, chapter 4, yeah. Okay, okay. So here I will actually begin with actually the finding. So the themes here, one is I found that there's actually 4 sub-ethnic identity that actually been represented in Malaysian museums. One is actually the Bugis. So these are actually the ideal types is actually a collection on the table. Okay, if come to the writing is actually on the table, but this is actually the summarized. So when come to representation on the Bugisness in the National Museum, Bugis is actually been represented as actually a sub-ethnic group which is vigorous, dynamic, heroic, and they are actually the one which is actually relates to sea. Okay, relates to sea. What I'm saying is when think about Malay world, it is actually on the territory. Sea as actually a part of territory as well. That's why Sumatra you have Sumatra, which is the sea. Okay, sea as a part of territory. So besides the hinterlands, the sub-ethnic group that relates to actually the sea is actually the Bugis. In terms of its representation, I would not say that reduced, but represented in terms of the Bugis Pinisi ship model and also the picture. Okay, you have actually maps of the local knowledge of the local philosophy of migration. We call it as Merantau, and from actually the Sulawesi territory. So it's a bit primordial, okay? And in terms of Bugis, it is actually always in the museum. It portrays with the armory suit and also Negeri Sembilan State Museum. You have so-called the Bugis tracts or the Bugis viewed as actually a Bugis tracts. Okay, next one. Okay, so this is an example on the representation of Bugis in National Museum. It's always actually, when it comes to Bugis, it's actually the armory suit, which is, I call it as the samurai of the Malay world, right? Okay, another one. Okay, so this is actually the model of Penicillin, and the representation on actually the pictures, it is always with an armory. So these are the representation of so-called Bugis. And it actually fit in also at the Sub-Nation State Museum of Selangor, which is well represented in Selangor State, which the king or the Kerajaan State, the Sultan of Selangor, the Kerajaan Negeri Selangor, or the state government of Selangor, the Sultan refers to affiliated to the Bugisness, right? Okay, so this is actually, you see the representation of map. However, this is actually a modern map that actually used to actually portray where actually the Bugis actually migrated. So this is a representation in the Alam Shah Museum, Selangor State. Okay, right. Okay, the bigger one. Right, just example. Okay. Meanwhile, the representation of Javanese.
Take your time, don't worry about the time.
Okay. Right. Yeah. So, Prof, I'm a bit nervous.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. For actually, the Javanese is actually a representation in terms of the Malay weapons, especially Malay dagger. And when it comes to Javanese, it is actually much more represented, much more in terms of cultural. So the puppet show, wayang kulit, the musical instrument, and also the performance of Borombangan. It's actually a performance in terms, and that is actually a tiger head and actually a peacock demonstration. Is it
What is it called, Hanif?
Borong
I know, you're talking about.
Borong
Zakir would know. Yeah.
Berarti berubangan.
Boronggong.
Boronggong. Barangga. Just remember when you present later on, just remember, okay?
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Alright. So it reduced, not to say it reduced, but it represented at much more in terms of cultural and etc. Okay, and musical instruments such as angklung is actually affiliated to so-called the Javanese. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Of course, so-called Javanese and so-called Achenese later, the word is actually used to represent a location as well. And besides people, right? It proves what Anthony Miller said, right? Okay. Yeah. This is Candi Borobudur on a replica in National Museum, but the representation here is one is actually on religion and one is actually the old kingdom of Raja, okay, Sudohana, okay, the old Kerajaan state, and also in terms on Hindu Buddhism period. So one is actually religion, one is actually on the ancient regime. Okay. However, when come to this is the replica.
So a quick question. So the Javanese, the Borobudur is included in the portrayal of Malayness.
Yes, National Museum Gallery B. That is actually a replica and also a mini replica that is actually built like a mural. Borobudur. Part of Borobudur.
That's the biggest Buddhist monument.
Temple.
Temple. Am I right?
My hometown.
It's your hometown, yeah. Jogja, yeah. But it's not Jogja, it's away.
Central Java, yeah.
Central Java, yeah.
Magelang.
Magelang, yeah.
People like to put the hand inside. I don't know why.
And inside where?
The stupa, people go and put the hand inside.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this is in Gallery B, Museum Negara. Okay, as a replica. Okay, this is actually from Konservasi Borobudur website. I used to actually argue Borobudur, it is not only in terms of religion. Okay, it is not in terms of religion, but the relief itself, it actually bring meaning in terms of life, and the relief itself in the Malay world. I mean, tropical area when textile is actually not easy, it's challenging to study. So sometimes how to study back textile in the Malay world is you have to actually look at the remaining of actually the architect and also the arts craft in terms on the relief of Borobudur. Then that's how actually you get back the motif of the batik. Batik is one of the kind of textile in the Malay world. Okay, so what I argue is besides religion and old king ancient regime, that's much more things about Borobudur. But for Malaysia, full representation, it goes back to the Kerajaan state and it goes back to actually religion, so-called religion period. One of the I'm not saying religion is not important, but that's one of the major core of the civilization. So besides religion, you have a lot of things to see. Okay, thanks. This is Borobudur.
Yeah.
Right.
Pronunciation Borobudur.
Borobudur.
Yeah. Boro.
Borobudur.
Yeah.
Another one. Okay. So that's actually one of the particular gravestone. Sorry, not the gravestone yet, but the Chinese identity that actually represent in the National Museum is actually Aceh. It represent on actually a lot of museums. You have Achenese gravestone, the Achenese structure of gravestone, and also the Keleweng Machete, and also
Machete. Machete.
Machete. Okay.
It's a parang.
Yeah, the machete is a weapon. It's a weapon. Machete, and also in Perak, the royal family, the royal custom, it is actually absorbed in terms on the cultural material culture that actually affiliated in terms on Aceh.
Oh, Samir wants to come in. Okay.
Boleh.
Oh, okay. So that's actually sub-ethnic identity that which is underrepresented in the museum. It would be actually the Bali. Okay. I only actually find, I think, one Mandailing on Banjarmasin, Banjaris representation in Alam Sahlu Museum. Okay, but when it comes to Bali, this or the Bali identity, it actually reduced into actually the Chris or actually the Malay dagger in the Malay word, right?
You said Banjari.
Banjar.
You're not relating that to Bali, right?
No.
Okay. Banjar will be Kalimantan.
Yeah, they are good in diamond.
Yeah.
They are good in diamond.
Diamond.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
But that have it is actually maybe I need to have an ideal type, sir. Okay. After the themes on sub-ethnic identity, just now the themes is actually on Malay sub-ethnic group. So we have actually Bugis, the Javanese, and the Aceh, and also one more is actually the Minangkabau, which is much more represented in Malay, the museums that I study. Okay. After the themes of
But you did not capture that in your presentation on the Minangkabau.
yeah.
Okay.
Don't kill me.
No, but next time we want to include that because if it's a big part that you want to present that, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
All right. For actually, so besides the sub-ethnic identity, another themes would be the ancient regime. The ancient regime are divided into three three sub-themes. So one is actually themes on Sriwijaya. In China, the records will be 十里佛士, and Buddha will be Pula Fo Lo Pu To. Okay, Sriwijaya. The second one will be Majapahit. The third one would be the Malacca Empire. So what actually on the typology I found out is the representation on Sriwijaya, it is much more in terms of religion narrative. For example, in Lembah Bujang Archaeological Museum, it actually shows that people comes for study of religion in the Malay Peninsula, geographical location or spatial. It is actually the Golden Crossines and also in the middle of a very good location on Bay of Bengal and the connection in terms of South China Sea. That would be actually the representation of Sriwijaya. Majapahit is really limited into actually the name of the ship only. So the Chadic Majapahit ship. But I checked, Chadic ship is actually a shared technology, okay, on the Chadic ship. Okay, but for Malacca, much more, you can actually find much more dominant representation in Malacca. It would actually be, it would represent Islam, okay, as actually the religion, okay, of the Malacca Empire. Displays of spice and sunken ship, it actually go into the framework of national cultural policy. Malacca is a trading port. And the last one would be Gallery B of colonialization. Nusantara, the Sultanate ends with the tragic colonialization. Okay. For example, for example, this is actually the Batra Majapahit. So Majapahit is reduced into actually a representation on the ship as well, only. Okay, second. Okay, so just now this is a marker, okay, marker of the Sultan. Okay, the Sultan been converted, okay, by the Arab traders. Okay, so that this is a copy of Quran and also the maps of Nusantara. This is actually it looks like a voyage map. Okay, but it used on the red line how actually Islam is being actually spread in Nusantara. Okay, so the orbit of Malacca in terms on the representation on Islam, right? Okay, so this is one of it. Okay, it also represents on actually these are the Muslim populated areas on actually the cities as well. Okay, so yeah, right.
Jogja is there, right?
Yeah, Jogja.
And this hometown.
Oh, Jogja. Okay, okay. So the ancient regime also we have actually found that Patani it been actually represent in terms of Malay dagger. However, Patani actually always represent on the mentioning of Sayam. Okay, Sayam, and also it actually mentioned on the linguistic pattern which is in Malay. Okay, the linguistic, the logat or the linguistic pattern, and you can find on the royal state of Patani and so-called the construction on the bordery, the imaginary of Patani, Siam, and the northern Malay state. Okay, and the last subtheme will be the Sulu Sultanate. Okay, so very minor representation. The museum description text will say that, oh, this is actually a Malay kingdom in Borneo. Okay, so Mindanao was actually not mentioned. Kota Tinggi Museum, Johor State, would be actually mentioned an armory suit on the Moros or the southern Philippines. So when we talk about actually Sulu Sultanate, it includes Mindanao Island in modern Philippines nowadays. So it been actually Mindanao is part of Mindanao is actually been taken out. Oh, okay, this is actually part of Malay Kingdom in Borneo, right? So yeah. Okay, that would be the just now on actually the themes on kingdom. So now I move to the themes on Malay identity when it meets to imperialism and colonialization. Okay, so when it comes to actually imperialism and colonization, Portuguese representation would be actually brings down the invasion force. It is actually viewed as an invasive force that brings down Malacca Sultanate, and the representation is the Portuguese brings on its suffer to the people in Johor Sultanate, and it is always a representation on the suffering, agony, asymmetric warfare that actually resist the Portuguese from actually the kingdom of Johor. After Malacca comes the kingdom of Johor. Okay, so the representation is always bloodshed, agony, and sufferings into the Malay civilization. Okay, for Dutch, the representation, especially in Kota Tinggi Museum, it would actually, I think, I cannot use the word thing. The evidence shows that when it comes to representation of Dutch, it is much more a more equal partner, or actually a loose ally with Johor Sultanate in the Malay world. Possibly, the pattern shows that it is more actually a equal partnership. Okay, and so-called the narrative of treaty come into the picture, but however, that's actually a representation on the attack. Okay, attack of Dutch to actually the Sultanate of Selangor. That would be a more aggressive and also invasive force when it comes to the representation in Al-Awsat Museum, Selangor State. Okay, right. When British, when they come to the colonial power of the British, it is actually much more towards intervention or interference. So here I call it as actually a treaty, the empires of paper. They like to sign treaty, etc. Okay, in Museum Negara, the diorama of Bangkok engagement comes into the picture, and you would actually have a diorama that's signing the Bangkok and Bangkok engagement, and here comes actually the colonialization, and eventually the machete that assassinated J.W.W. Birch was actually made into an important museum display. It says that the weapon stamped the first British resident of Perak. So it is actually much more in terms on that starts the story of the resistance in terms of J.W.W. Bush.
Bush?
It is Birch. Okay.
Bush will be the president, right?
Luckily, I don't say beach. Okay, J.W.W. Birch. The feudal lord transformed into actually the modern day nation state as actually the era of starting on anti-colonialization. Okay, so Maharaja Lela would be the feudal lord, but it transformed into actually an anti-colonization figure.
So the representation of Malinas is closely associated to anti-colonization too.
When it comes to British, and
British.
also on the representation also on colonial modernity. So when it comes to British, it's always tin come in the picture, the rubber come in the picture, the modern school, etc. So the absorption of the ideas of modernity is imprinted or actually landed inside the museum.
So I'm just quick one. In China, you have that anti-colonial narrative as well. Strong, not strong.
China. Yeah, maybe.
Anti-colonial fighting with
Actually, it just depends on what you mean anti-colonial.
okay.
What thing?
Against the British, against the
Against the.
Oh yeah, we
Western
have that kind of
The
history.
occupation.
yeah.
Yeah,
Against
because
the British,
the Hong Kong, the place was
yeah,
taken.
Hong Kong, Macau, yeah.
The
Yeah.
Opium War, 1840.
Opium War, yeah, Opium
Yeah,
War.
yeah. Just because there could be some kind of a miserable and tragic time period in our history.
So that's an important part.
Against Japan.
Against Japan, yeah.
It's true. Actually, it's true against Japan. And so I'm really curious about like Chang's analysis. So, what do Malaysian people would think about the relationship with Japan
We'll see
and in your history?
whether there's a
no.
representation, whether there's a representation of the Japanese occupation and all. Maybe go ahead.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
I think Iraq will have a strong do you?
Yeah.
Anti-colonial
Yeah.
okay narrative too in the identity, right?
Go
ahead.
Gun.
Guns.
In Indonesia, to Peta Museum, something positive. Pembela Tanah Air, the Museum of Pembela Tanah Air. Is it something positive?
I don't really know with the history of Indonesia because I've been since children. I've been in Malaysia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from Standard 4 in
I
Malaysia.
used to.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, right.
So that's England, UK, English.
Okay. This is
So the Japanese part is not captured.
Prof, I think I can construct, but not much.
Not much,
It's not captured. Not much.
Oh. Okay, so we'll go through it.
It is just the Japanese. It's actually the World War II, and faster it comes to independence.
We can talk about it later. Things are digital.
Right.
Okay. Right. So this is actually in Kota Tinggi Museum. It is actually people who are trying to in modern days it's like refugees is trying to run away because of the Portuguese attack. Right. Okay. So this is in Negeri Sembilan State Museum. So you can see that the representation of this visual here, it is always the pahlawan, or actually the Malay warriors. The face is always the pahlawan. Okay, the Malay warriors that actually resisting.
Pahlawan is warrior.
Warrior.
Pahlawan.
They are
Warrior.
The
Like resistance?
Star Wars, Padawan.
It is not the laser.
no, no.
Okay, all right. So you see the face of this representation, it means something because the order of the faces is actually all the pahlawan is actually facing
Or the warriors,
invaders, the warriors. Yeah. All right. Okay, so for imperialism, the finding this one. Okay, this one is the representation of bunga emas. Bunga emas is actually a tributary. It's actually a golden flower tree that actually you need to actually present it to Siam. So it's like 进贡, is it? Yeah. So it's a tributary. It's a tributary to the Siam, but that is actually we have a lot of argument on this, whether it's actually a dependency state, a tributary state, etc. But however, when
Siam is Thailand.
oh yeah, Siam is Thailand. Okay, when come to Kota Kaya Museum, Perlis, you can see that the representation of a map route on how actually the arrow of actually the Bunga Emas tributary convoy, and also you have a replica of Bunga Emas. When come to Museum Negara, the description of Bunga Emas include so-called the sorry, this is Perlis. So the four actually so-called Malay states, northern Malay states. So and you have actually architectural replica of Bunga Emas, and also the wall of Museum Negara is actually with the symbol of the convoy of Bunga Emas, but we actually using boat. Okay, so this is actually a land route, but here the representation is actually by boat. Okay, and Perak, you have a very minor description on the hantaran or the royal gift. So we remember the remembrance is actually on the Bunga Emas. So actually the gift is actually the golden flower tree and the silver flower tree and the royal gift. But Malaysia, the representation is much more towards the Bunga Emas. Okay, and after the data collection, I go back to Kedah State Museum. Now they have two big replicas of Bunga Emas and Bunga Perak.
Oh.
So finally, they have something like this.
Okay.
Finally,
Yeah.
correct. Okay. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So this is in Kota Kaya Museum, Perlis. So this is actually the route of the Bunga Emas from actually the northern Malay, so-called northern Malay state to actually Bangkok. Right. Okay, so here is actually the Bunga Emas. This is the Bunga Emas. This is
the National Museum.
Siam. This is the mural of National Museum. Okay, so it's here. Right. Okay, so this is the.
What's the other picture behind that? What is it? Angkor Wat?
Prof, I need to check the tapestry of museum. This is Thailand.
Thailand. Yeah. Okay.
Bangkok.
Understand.
So the convoy of Bunga Emas towards Thailand. Yeah.
1840.
1840, Kedah, I think.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a replica of Bunga Emas. This is not the real one.
Is it big? How big?
Depends on state. So depends on state. So some of the state is actually bigger, some of the state is smaller. It depends.
It's gold and the
Well,
some heists to steal that. Mission Impossible thing.
If you don't want, you give me. If you don't want, please give me. For information, Perak almost be included. Perak state almost be included on the tributary, but that you have argument.
I
And
see.
Perak say no. Okay. After the colonialization themes, one of the themes that I construct would be much more to the use of map, or actually for political cartography. Okay, maps is actually a representation of power. But however, maps actually used in Museum Negara will actually represent on sunken ship map. The modern map have been used to actually portray the territory of a Muslim population, Malay Archipelago, and to actually reproduce on the voyage map on Malacca. as a maritime trading port or trading polity. Okay, Kota Tinggi Museum will actually use map, but it is actually a modern map to actually portray Johor and Tanah Ujong. For information, Tanah Ujong is Singapore, so the Peninsular Malaysia until the end is the Ujong, Tanah Ujong, and also the 17th century Empire of Johor map. Kota Daya Museum Police will actually produce in terms of maps used on the location, religion use of map, the location of Batu Aceh, on also the trade route tributary of Bunga Emas. Okay, for Negeri Sembilan State Museum, it is much more portrayal in terms on the migration of the sub-ethnic identity of the Minangkabau people from Pagaruyung, Indonesia,
Sumatra.
Sumatra. Okay, and they have maps to actually the maps in the voyage era to actually produce say that that's actually a place of Rembau or actually Rambo. Okay, and also in terms of where is actually the modern map of the territory of the customary land. Okay, Alam Shah Museum just now, the map shows that the Bugis custom of migration map. Lembah Bujang Archaeological Museum shows that the maps on the Indian islands of the Malay Peninsula with Chrysonos aura, which is the golden Chrysonos, and also the maritime trade route and the influential spheres of Sriwijaya Empire. Okay. Okay. Here, the themes here would be Malay manuscripts. One of the important representation in Malaysia itself. Okay, the representation of Malay manuscript is mostly I cannot read Jawi, but mostly the manuscript that actually made into museum display is actually in Jawi-like alphabet. And
So Jawi like alphabets are Arabic alphabets.
yeah,
Arabic alphabets. They are made into Malay, but spelled into Malay language. And
therefore I can use Arabic alphabet.
it is predominantly Arabic alphabets because
Okay.
there are some words that do not have like pa, and they have Arabic don't have pa.
Mm.
Yeah. That's where, or that's where they have problems saying parking,
Oh.
barking, don't park your car here.
Don't bark. Don't bark.
I want barking. You want barking? Go there, run there.
So the Arabic there's no P, there's B.
Yeah.
So the when it's parking, many Arabs will say barking because there's no P. In Arabic,
Barking means the dog.
Barking,
The
Barking,
boy.
barking, the dog barking.
Dog boy means barking.
So we are all influenced by our language. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like Arabic also, right? It's actually Arab system and okay. So it's Jawa alphabets, and in Kota Tinggi Museum Johor, you can actually find the representation of medical knowledge manuscript. Later I have argument also, should I include Quran here also, because Quran is actually put into the display of
Put in display. Yeah, you said just now. Yeah. I suppose you should because it's part of the manuscript, right? Yeah, because you classify manuscript as written form, written.
Okay, then I'll include that. Okay,
Maybe you can put a dot Quran there, so maybe that. Then it will be another kind of a category of religious manuscript, maybe. Yeah.
okay, then I'll make into
Something like that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, right. So okay, Quran would be actually one of the important one. Medical knowledge. You have I can find actually the mention of nation founding myth, the Malay annals, but the representation on the manuscript replica is not there. But it is actually just a word mentioning the Malay annals. And when I go to Kedah State Museum, that is actually the Hikayat Merong Mahawangsa, the founding myth of Kedah Sultanate.
Finally, there's something there.
Hmm?
Finally, there's something there from Kedah. Anyway, go ahead. I'd make certain noise, but that's not it.
It's empty. But the third time I go there, I think last year January is very they refine it, which is I like it very much. Okay, so the nation founding myth. Okay, and also there's a literature-based manuscript also in Kedah State Museum. Okay, but however, the analysis here would actually comes in picture is certain scholars would actually put Malay manuscript, the production of Malay manuscript goes into four eras. Okay, or one the last actually era would be actually one of the era would be the initiative of copyists. So what represented in actually Museum Negara, it is actually the copies which actually dated back in 19th century. Okay, but however, Malay manuscript like nation founding myths is important to understand history, but different civilization write history on its own terms, because certain national founding myth is actually so-called court texts, or actually those knowledge which is monopolized by the royal court. So it is not accessed to actually the public. But after the empire falls and you've been permitted to copy, so you can have your own version. So that's why you have different versions of this actually nation founding myth, right? However, it is important actually to study the worldview laden inside the Malay manuscript itself. Okay, of course, you want to trace. It is not easy, or it is challenging to trace the original copy of a Malay manuscript, because tropical area, when you write in actually the bark of the tree, or actually the palm leaf. Okay, in Mandarin we call it as a peiye. Okay, so it's the palm leaf. It will actually vanish away in 100 years or 200
It's
years.
very environmentally friendly.
I told people, if you find one in your house you don't want, please give me. I'll take it.
Biodegradable, right? So,
But Renchong survived. If not mistaken, it right on the horn of the bull.
oh, right.
So it actually survived.
Okay. So it's basically like bones and
Yeah, it's like a Dead Sea Scroll.
Yeah.
So basically, the initiative of the copies. So these are the many manuscripts who survive. But this is some, of course, when come to Museum Negara, when come to the museum, the representation goes to the Jawi alphabets in terms of science and technology, nation founding myth, and the literature-based manuscript. Okay. 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 So this is actually another one would be the representation on the Achenese gravestone. The Achenese gravestone is actually located inside the museum and located also outside. One of the museum is even located outside the museum as well. So you put all the gravestone inside the museum. Yeah. Did China do that? I think they won't do that, right? The whole gravestone move inside to the museum.
Both means too.
Both things. Okay. Right. All right. So the gravestone is actually a manifestation or representation on important its ornament, it is its arts value, and also the religious value is always there when it comes to Aceh gravestone. So it is very decorative, and you have museum that shows the map of the regions of Batu Nisan Aceh, which is the Johor Lama Museum, Federally Johor Lama Museum, and also the Kota Kayam Museum, Federally Kota Kayam Museum Police. Okay, so this is okay, so this is the example. This is not the gravestone. This is this is the. Now I want to show the size.
Oh, okay. Show the size. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, that's big. Yeah.
Mm.
Stone.
Recently, police also have already
Oh.
since last year. So this is some is actually the real one, and some is actually the replica. Right. Mhm. So this is just an argument, but this is not in Malaysia. Like besides the representation, we have make it into actually what I call it as the invention of tradition. But in Malaysia, when it comes to Islamic based Islamic influence creation, we do not have this is called plum plank. It is actually a early Islamic gravestone that discovered. Okay, but Malaysia we don't have this representation. Okay, right.
Where is this?
This is
Tombstone.
Gravestone.
Yeah,
The gravestone.
grave.
grave.
Yeah, I know. I know gravestone.
that's
So
right.
is it
Nissan, you
it's
call
not
it.
like artifacts or like this?
It is artifact. It's considered artifact. Yeah.
You make into artifacts that represent the importance of the Islamic the marker of
I mean-
Islamic
I mean-
civilization.
The people they create the stone or stone created by nature, and people grave in the stone.
Oh, okay. Is it placed there by individual or is it part of a stone and somebody carved it?
Somebody craft it.
But
This
then is it,
somebody, but it already exists. This stone from nature. It's naturally,
No.
not naturally,
No.
created from individual.
Yeah.
I mean artifacts.
it is artifact.
Yeah.
But you're saying create an individual like a cement thing or a stone?
Somebody he creates stone.
Take a stone?
Yeah, he creates stone.
Yeah.
For to write or grave or draw.
Yeah. It's artifact. Yeah.
One of the material is actually sandstone. Sandstone. And but arguable Chinese gravestone is actually for the royals.
This is Chinese.
No, this is palm blank, but another one in our museum that's a Chinese gravestone.
I see.
This is no, it's not in any Malaysia museum.
But it's Islamic.
Yeah.
Where is it from now? Kyoto?
No, this is actually a project, the maritime.
You know.
Cannot get away.
This is a project, Maritime Asia Heritage. They go and archive every heritage artifacts in all around Maldives, Indian Ocean to Malaysia, Indonesia as well. So this is they argue. Now I just use this to actually make a strong argument that besides a Chinese gravestone, there is an Islamic graves.
I see. Okay, all right. Just to compare.
Right. But we celebrate a Chinese gravestone. But in the ancient time, a Chinese gravestone is actually used by the nobles or the aristocrat to actually in terms of burial. Okay, but it transformed into a representation of Islamic value in the labor. Okay. You make into the important. You give meaning to the gravestone, and it becomes artifacts. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Prof, this because I'm still writing, so I try to present this chapter. This is actually a draft. Okay, so from the discussion on conclusion, I try to argue one. I try to actually how do national museums in Malaysia portray Malay identity? It answer back in terms on they refine the theory in terms of imagined community. It sets actually a boundary. So the boundary is on Malacca oriented. Some of the books will use Malacca centric, but use the word Malacca oriented. That dominates the nation state framework, but it do not actually limited to Malacca centric only. Okay. The second thing would be indeed refine of theory, nation building, and the sub-nation state identity is of course you have one is actually for nation building and identity building. It is actually much more on the Malay Muslim framework, but yeah, you would also have museum that celebrates sub-national identity. That would be actually much more obvious would be Selangor State Lead Museum, the Alam Shah Museum, and also the Negeri Sembilan State Museum. But however, when it comes to Minangkabau, Minang people is everywhere, but it's not on Negeri Sembilan only. Alright? Okay. And sub-ethnic identity in Malaysia that represented much more would be Javanese, Acehnese, Bugis, Minangkabau. Four. Alright. The underrepresentation one would be the Orang Sulu, Bali, Banjar, that mention about a place called Maluku. Orang Batak or Batak people wipe up from the sea. Okay, I do not find representation on the Batak people. Alright.
You have Mandailing, right? You said it, no?
Yeah, I think Alam Shah Museum there's a representation of Mandailing.
So there's a debate about Mandailing are Batak or not. The Mandailings do not want to see themselves as Batak, but the Batak see Mandailing as a Batak. That's another.
Yeah.
But it's okay. Okay, sure.
Alright, okay. So the museum tax is actually the museum tax is actually landed in terms of power. Arrangement. It actually means the much more reason argument on the stiff construction of Malay identity in Malaysia. So when it comes to invented tradition, this Merantau, Bugis, Pinisi ship, Malay annals are actually a much more modern invented tradition. Because Malay annals, first, it is actually the genealogy of king or Al-Salalatu Salatin. Okay, so it is actually a court text originated, but now it become a literature and is celebrated into actually an important heritage figure in Malaysia. The creed actually by the royals of the aristocrat group, the nobles, is celebrated into a representation of Malay identity, and also Bugis Pinisi, you go through involvement, it might actually it is actually a shared architectural on shipbuilding, because in Malaysia you have Pinisi ship, but we do not have the representation of Pedawakang. But there's argument Pedawakang ship, it is actually a construction of ship technology in southern Sulawesi. But that's our argument as well. Okay, so and then the museum tax, the choice of tax is actually shows power dynamic. Right. Okay, research question 2. I think and I come up with one more later. In research question 2, I might come up with a model, or actually I come up with a niche that actually spheres to understand Malayness. So because the where's the okay, I'll continue RO3 on that, but here is actually the historical spheres that represent or actually imagining Malay identity and Malay history in Malaysia nation-state framework. So the first one would be, of course, the Melaka-based historical sphere, the Kedah, Patani, Sulu, okay, Brunei, Sambas, that would be a little bit, okay, Brunei, Sambas, you have a representation of Brunei in Museum Negara, that's all. But we do not actually remember the existence of Sambas. And one more is actually Aceh Sultanate as the historical sphere. Okay, Hanif, thanks. Okay, I absorbed a little bit idea from Prof. Riwani's keynote. I was featured virtually on the conference, Unimas, I must.
Oh, you must. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. On actually how we think about Malayness nowadays, it is actually a boundary on nation state, and it based on so-called the Westphalian system that influence how we think. But just now I used the word historical sphere is because when it comes to modern maps and modern cartography, it is always a boundary. But like just what I said is like Malay civilization is some of the idea is what we call it as the Mandala worldview. But that's argument also. Mandala is actually invented terms to describe Malayness. So Mandala is actually like, okay, here is actually Malacca. And if you are actually a noble out from Malacca, you might say that who is actually you affiliated? I will say that I'm a subject of Malacca and I report to the Sultanate. But the Sultan say that, oh, the empire is too vast already, so you settle yourself or you take care of autonomy. So as long as you are actually more close to the orbit or actually to the core, then you'll be influenced by the Sultanate. So that's actually a state system, okay, in the Malay world, which is so different from the Westphalian state system. So when it comes to RO3 or the alternative discourse or more post-colonial discourse, we should not actually limit on actually the debates uh, uh, on the Westphalian system. So the empire building and also the modernity of museum itself and the imaginative of political catastrophe, how you actually draw maps, do actually impact how museum narrates the idea of Malay. So we, in museum, when it comes to local knowledge, we do not have orang luar or orang kita or atas angin or bawah angin. In the literature, in the research problem just now, sorry, in the problem statement just now, I forgot to actually mention the word bangsa or actually race. It is actually a modern invented term. It's like 中国 is actually by Liang Qichao. So in Dynasty Qing, is the subject of the royal kingdom. So you don't have the word 中国 until early 2000th century. So it's by Liang
Zhongguo
Qichao.
is China.
China, yeah, the Middle Kingdom. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's by Liang Qichao, if not mistaken.
You guys are learning something new too, right?
I just said I have a low school in history.
Okay, okay. No.
Okay. So so when actually cited Arifin Omar in the book Bangsa Melayu, when 1930s, if you use the word Bangsa, the people and the Sultanate protest against you because the idea in 1930s is I am the subject of the Sultanate. So why you call me as Melayu? Why you call me as Bangsa? So Bangsa is actually something new until in 1930s, etc., 40s. Okay, but when come to actually the Malay world, you have the orang luar and orang kita. Our people or actually the people from the outside, etc. And when come to imagine in terms of kingdoms, you have the atas angin and the bawah angin.
Might not want to have that gesture, have a different gesture.
Okay.
So atas angin is above air, above the sky.
Yeah.
Below the sky or away from the
wind.
Angin here is a wind.
The angin, the
wind.
wind. The civilizations below.
Away.
Prof, next time I'll use a pen. I'm nervous.
It's okay.
I'm nervous. I will divert my the stress. Okay. Right. So the migration webs is a local. It actually portrays also the local knowledge of Maranta. So when it comes to okay, so Malay identity is being civilized. The narrative of civilization is the museum it carries when it comes to treaty, when it comes to actually to celebrate in terms of school system, vernacular system, and also the the existence of the Chinese and so-called Indians. It is actually been binded by a thought of colonial modernity. I mean, there's less representation on madrasah. There's less representation of pondok school in education system, right? The pondok school is actually the religious schools in the Malay world. Okay, madrasah also. So one is actually the vernacular system is imprinted with the colonial administration system, but the pondok is actually not by force. Okay, right. So not to say the original, the local knowledge that is not by force, it is actually need to be presented. And in actually the museum, you
You wrap it up in 2 more minutes, yeah.
Huh?
Wrap up your.
Oh, all right, okay. So it seems that there's a collapse of the maritime Southeast Asia trade system, which the Malay identity on Tanah Air is actually the sea is actually sea and sea network is underrepresentative, and the sub-ethnic group, some of them is underrepresentative, and that is
Underrepresented, right?
underrepresented, and also that's we can from museum we can construct or the local knowledge of Merantau, Kerajaan State, Mandala, etc. Okay, last one. Okay, I think yeah. Sorry, the
What is it?
contribution. Huh? Oh, this is actually okay. The Malay identity on Malay merchant class is it is actually not that obvious in museum. So Malay in terms of arts, in terms of Islam, but the underrepresentation is Malay as a merchant class. The trading polity itself. The museum do not have link. This is the Madura ship, and also this is actually the Jambuana ship. Some of them is actually carry in terms of local logistic and local trade. The local and the regional trade is the supplementary to the international trade in maritime Southeast Asia. So these are the things that in terms of Malay identity that do not actually links together to describe Malayness. So that you do not have Malaysia might want to have these debates on the identity of the Malay merchant class, and also the importance of the indigenous trading, maritime trade. Of course, to expand, the Orang Laut is actually vanished away on the representation. The seafarers is actually it's like GPS lah. Okay, it's vanished away from the debates of Malay identity. Okay. Okay, so for theoretical contribution, I try to refinish the theory and improve the theory, the feature of theory that could be applied towards the Malay identity and museum. And the conceptual would be actually the local knowledge that need to be described, the Merantau, Mandala, Kerajaan State, etc. And that's an interdisciplinary contribution. When it comes to study of museum Malaysia, we need to think about anthropology, sociology, in terms of media study on representation, history, and power dynamics. Okay, this is the finish. Limitation, the last one. It is like case study. The limitation of case study is the case might actually valid in Malaysian nation state, but it do not relate to Patani, it do not relate to Indonesia. It has its limit, and this is lack of longitude study, right? And third would be concentrate on the museum text, the order of the display that had been produced. So I do not include the policy makers. So it is not a complete picture, but because Nusantara is a vast imaginative geography. So Indonesia might not be the same. Or example, we do not mention Sultanate of Ternate. We do not have this niche. Right, and for future study, encode would be the museum content. For future study, might have someone wanted to analyze the museum audience analysis. This is for recommendation for future study. Okay, I end my presentation. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Right. Okay. How do you feel, Chan?
Huh?
How do you feel?
I feel there's a lot of things need to refine.
Okay.
To refine.
Given you a lot of leeway that you have been presented more than an hour and 15 minutes or so, an hour and 10 minutes or so. So actually more than that. So which is fine because you're presenting the whole thing. There are things that need to be improved, need to be upgraded and all that. But I think you're ready for the presentation, ready for the sample presentation, right? Okay. Just to have a quick way of preparing you for the presentation, right? The presentation is about 20 minutes plus minus. Right? Can be slightly more, but not too long. Right? So what you want to do is to make your literature review much more concise, maybe 1 or 2 slides the most, right? This is a findings presentation, also known as research progress presentation. So you could not skip, you just reduce your methodology to just 1 slide again, or maybe the most 2 slides, right? Problem statement 1, and then you have the problem statement plus intro, maybe 1, maybe 2, and literature review, maybe 1, maybe 2, and then a methodology, maybe 1, maybe 2. So all in all, it's about 4 to 6, that will be enough for that. So you want to focus more on your findings, right? Now the findings, there are 2 parts to findings. There's findings, there's also the analysis or the discussion, right? So you can stop at your findings. You don't have to go analysis if you do not want, right? But you could, if you want to, whatever it is, you want to practice so that it is not more than 20 minutes, but you can add another 5 minutes plus minus. Right? So you do have this. This is enough. You have something really solid here. This is good. What you have here. So you're ready to make the presentation. So next time around is to schedule. If you can schedule today, it would be good. If you can't, you just call or email to Pon Roshima requesting for Sampris presentation. Of course, it'll be after Hari Raya, of course, right? So you're ready for that. Just whatever you have, you just make more concise, right? But part of the presentation strategy is also to keep whatever you have after thank you. So if anyone want to ask you, what about this? What about, you can refer back after thank you. You have some more slides. So your slides are this much. This much, but you present up to this point only. Up to thank you. So the rest is keep up to thank you. So if the evaluator or evaluators ask you, you can go back. That's a good point. I go to the slide that I prepared for you all. So the general rule of thumb is that 1 slide is about 3 minutes plus minus. So you think about it, if you have 20, 25 minutes, how many slides you have there, right? So you have about 8, 9 slides, something like that. So so you're ready. So congratulations. Congratulations, you're ready. You must make the presentation as soon as possible after Hari Raya. Yeah. So that's a good move. I do want to give you some inputs on your presentation, right? So let's start from the beginning. Okay, good that you give a one-liner explanation to your title. So what you all do when you present in the title is you help the audience, especially the evaluators or examiners, to focus on certain things. So you say, here I want to focus on the Malay identity, how the museums portray Malay identity. Right? So you want to say that. So that is the focus of my work. There you go. So people are clear. Yeah? So you do that one-line explanation into that, right? Okay, let's go to your problem statement. The next one. Before that, Manakala, thank you, Anne. This is good because you give a kind of a general introduction without the paragraphs, which is good. The other thing that I like by your presentation is that you explain, you do not read, which is good. You stand there and explain. Now, I do not necessarily prescribe this to everyone that should stand and explain. If you feel that you are not too confident, you're not too sure, or your language you have some limitations, right? By that time you should not have a limitation, but if you think you have limitation, then go ahead and write and read, it's fine, right? But it's more powerful, it's much more convincing that you stand there and explain or sit there and explain. So you want to explain instead of read, that will be much better, right? So this is good when you explain that. You might have a bit too many here, but as an intro, because seven things in 1 minute, 7 minutes, right? You think about that, right? Okay. So go to the problem statement. I think you have your problem statement extended to two,
Three.
right? So think about three, a bit too long for your problem statement. Right? Again, for findings presentation, keep your problem statement to just one, maybe two. You really need to. But if you can do the explanation, will be better. You know,
Like the first slide.
like the first slide,
Okay.
you can have that. You can have two, but you explain one. If the examiner or the evaluators, I'm not quite sure, then show the paragraphs. Right?
Okay.
To explain. So uh, the 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 drawback when you have a 3 slide long problem statement is that problem becomes buried in the so many texts. So now, what is the problem now? So you want to at the end you want to say, well, the problem statement I focus 1, 2, 3, something like that, right? So I remember when we talk about problem statement that leads to, I think the next is a research gap, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Next slide, Hanif, after problem statement. Okay, when you talk about the research gap, I did explain last time. There are many types of gaps, many types of vacuum, right? So empirical is one, but you want to also highlight the conceptual or theoretical gap, right? That has not been explained by previous studies or theories, right? So what is that conceptual gap? Aside from empirical gap, right?
Okay.
Empirical is that no one has studied this before. Empirical, conceptual or theoretical, no theories have explained this before, you know. So you want to show that
No theory is explained before.
this there'll be theoretical, right? So there's a gap in theory, then gap in explanation, right? About what's happening here, something like that. So in PhD, we want to reach to the theoretical gap, not just empirical. Right, okay, the next one. Okay, your research questions, yeah? Now we're talking about research questions. The third research question, number 3, you use the word alternative discourse. What is the typology for alternative discourse?
This one, I would want to ask your opinion because
Okay.
it would actually bring me into a grave, jalan menemui jalan ajar. If the third research question, it is actually on post-colonial theme, which is you deconstruct the colonial imprint in the museum. Would it better? But if I accept this, that would be, is it there's a necessary of one more research question that cater on the local knowledge that can be constructed in the museum. So this is the thing that I'm thinking.
Okay.
But
Let's deal with one thing at a time now, right? Now, the question number 2, you have what are the historical narratives for the Malay identities in the museum display, right? So your answer will be, the narratives are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'll be the answer to research question number 2. Then you have research question number 3. What is the typology, or what are the typologies? So you will need to show the typologies at the end if you use the word typology, right? So you got what is typology? If you do not have typology, you do not want to have this question, right? I'm not sure you have typology at the end now.
no,
Not yet, right?
I don't want to have this
Okay,
question.
maybe in the analysis, maybe. The other part to this is you use the word alternative discourse for research question. When you say alternative discourse, meaning there's a discourse already there, but here you're actually capturing all the discourses, right? Right. So it should be typologies
Post-colonial.
for before you go to post-colonial. Right? What are the typologies of discourses for the portrayal? I think you're capturing all the discourses, right? You're not suggesting that this is the discourse, I'm studying something else. You're capturing all, and so it should be typologies of discourses.
Typology of discourses.
Yeah. Then at the end you have typology at the end. But I can imagine the typologies that you can have. You could have good typologies at the end. That you have, what is it? Yeah, the cultural Malay, whatever, the Islamic Malay, that would be the typologies that exist. So Malay is culturally like the warrior Malay, whatever like you come up with
The merchant.
or merchant, which is the lacking part of the we were talking about now. Right? So, but however you want to capture the typology, you just need to connect it to your findings. Typology is already the next level analysis, which is good. Right?
From this typology, may I ask, is it actually the chapter 5 or the chapter?
Now, this is another point I want to raise, which is you when you write your chapter 4, if I'm not sure, you're already entering the way you have presented to me is now, right? The findings are already in a form of analysis,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So what you could do is, in the findings itself, the chapter itself, you can call findings and analysis of something.
Finding and
Analysis of something. So you're actually not you're not separating the findings from your analysis, because you're actually doing the kind of a thematic analysis as well. You're doing the inductive reasoning of the categories. Right? You're putting them into different categories there, right? So you're already doing analysis at that point.
Okay.
So you can say that your findings and analysis are together, which you could do too, right? Now, you asked me about the post-colonial thing. So, what kind of research question do you imagine you want to put? There'll be a research question number 4, separated from this one.
Oh, okay.
Or you can maintain this one and have in your analysis and your discussion later on, talk about the post-colonial analysis of your work.
The discussion and conclusion.
Discussion and conclusion, you can put it there. Right. Now, there are different views about why I should go into discussion, but I will not worry too much. Some people say in discussion you should not go introduce anything new. My thought is, I say it's fine, but you could either introduce the post-colonial analysis or critique at the end of chapter 5, or introduce it in chapter 6.
Okay.
Your conclusion chapter is chapter 5. Okay, you can introduce it chapter 4 and have a longer discussion in chapter 6. There'll be another way to do it.
Oh, okay.
Or just completely in discussion is fine with me too. So I'm imagining during the Viva, if the examiners will say, oh, this should be in chapter 5, then you just move to chapter 5. Or this should be in chapter 5, you move to chapter 4. Sometimes examiners, they have their own view about formatting,
Oh,
not big deal for me. I'm more the content guy than the format guy. So take note of that. I think keep it to that one first. Keep it to the analysis instead of putting a research question. It's not that you cannot put, but if you put in the research question, you got to be very clear about the research question.
okay. Yeah. Is it before I need to refurbish first on this before I present the finding?
Oh, the committee. Yeah, you will need to rework on your slides, of course.
Okay.
As I said, slides. General rule of thumb, if it's 3 minutes per slide, then we would have 10 slides, 8 slides, 8, something like that.
Okay.
Right? You want to make it more concise, more. You got to find which part you want to present more, because you have more. You have a lot there. You have a lot of good information, very, very good information. So, which brings me to another point, right? You want to ask something else?
No.
Okay. You have many tips there, so that you want to make sure that you help the evaluators and eventually the examiners to understand and not what you present, not get lost, right? Is to enumerate the theme 1, theme 2, theme 3, theme 4, right? So sometimes what will also help is that you have a little overview at the right or left side. Once you complete theme 1, you go to theme 2, you highlight theme 2. Now we're talking about theme 2. Just now with a little,
okay. Highlight.
if you want to do that
Indicators,
helps. Indicator, like whatever the overview of the themes, right? but might also help is you have a recap of the themes at the end. Okay, you can do that. But these are all little presentation strategies to make people understand better, can digest it better. You know. So, right. I'm gonna go. Then I'll give different comments later on. I'm just gonna go slide by slide now. Can you go to the Malay manuscript just now? Malay manuscript.
Last few.
Last few. Yeah.
No, the last.
Okay. No, that.
I think yang akhir. Turun lagi ani.
That's the one. Okay.
Yeah.
You have the word myth there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason you use the word myth there?
Prof. Okay. National founding myth is I think every nation have national founding myth. Madani Malaysia, Malaysia Baru, Rahman. Yeah, that's national founding myth. It is common for common for any nation until now. You have a national founding myth.
So you're using the word myth in that context, yeah?
Yes, 新中国, the new China, Mao Zedong, the 新中国. 新中国 is actually a nation founding myth.
Okay.
So that's very important.
Alright.
So the Malay founding myth is the descendant of Alexander the Great.
Okay.
This myth came from a popular story
It
it came from history, deep history.
is when you found a nation state, you need something to legit yourself. So like America, they will legit themselves that the Constitution of America is written on the Mayflower vessel. Yeah. But true or not, that is another thing. But you,
Like, for example, in Iraq, we have myth from Mesopotamia, Gilgamesh.
Mesopotamia.
This is myth. Yeah.
So that's the question I have. So
Okay.
which is the question that Mutadi would be thinking?
So
Is the word myth or
I put it in this context.
Okay,
Nation
right.
founding.
Right. Yeah, I know that many using the myth in terms of it can be proven, it cannot be proven, it can be historically related, might not be historically related, right? So okay, so be able to defend that.
Okay.
Maybe you can also, if somebody were to ask you, you can give some other examples that people use that word myth. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I understand what you mean there. Now, you talk about Alexander the Great, and that's actually the Langkah Suka thing. Langkah Suka, which is northern, the Kedah,
Yeah.
founding of Kedah, which is one of the myths.
Merong Mahawangsa.
Mahawangsa from the Thailand, the empire of the Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, northern Indonesia, then or now, right? So that is another part of the nation founding myth or story or yeah. I'm just concerned. I'm thinking about not having a word that will be problematic later. That's what I'm thinking. But if you can defend that, it's fine.
Prof, can I capture someone will actually say that you think Malay manuscript is myth, then they will go into a lot of
Yeah. You see the point, man. You see my point, right? So,
yeah.
yeah. Just in case that, or you can put myth in a quote unquote of another way, right?
Okay.
Right. Nation founding. I don't know what other words you can use there, but I see your point. But be able to defend, or you can put myth stroke story.
Okay. Legitimacy.
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 Another word. So you want to legitimize legitimacy. That would be another
I
word.
use legitimize.
Okay, and then now chapter 5, move to the next one. Okay, here, Chang, your order of things under the Museum of Text, order of things, right? You will need to properly explain that one because that has theoretical implication too, right?
Yeah.
For
We need
Foucault.
to read Foucault,
Yeah, yeah. So you need to, connect. If you want to
explain.
you want to hack that, you gotta explain that. Be prepared to explain that. How is the other things related to or applied to the portrayal of Malayness or Malay identity. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I do think that you're ready. You're ready. Yeah. You just need to make it more concise to 20 minutes plus minus. You're ready for a presentation. This is very thick. The findings are very thick and ready. All you need to do is, in terms of findings presentation, you need to make it systematic, make it easy to digest, easy to understand, and then I see the big picture, and then it's a small picture, big picture, small picture there, right? So you already, it is good. A bit more reflection for me. There are, in your analysis, you also talk about what's missing there, right? I mean, there are a whole bunch of things that's missing there,
Yeah.
right? There's also the Sarawak story, the Sabah story. Sabah story, is it related to Malay? Is it not related to Malay? That kind of thing. This is after the analysis bit, right? And the idea of, and this one has to do with writing an article talking about. So, to what extent does the Malay representation in museum are Nusantarized, or to what extent it's not Nusantarized? So Nusantara would go out to Mindanao and to how deep, how you're talking about the different sub-ethnics there. So about Batak not included, the Moluku, which is the Ambon people there. So we can come up with a Nusantarization of Malay identity in museum, portrayal museum, and see the portrayals and the missing links or whatever you can call it. So that would be a very good way to come up with an article to talk about the Malay identity, right? Let me see what else I talk about now. I'm not reading. Let me see anything here. Okay. You haven't got to your deep discussion yet,
Yeah.
but you just find you don't have to present your deep discussion, your findings yet. Okay, we'll work on that more afterwards when we come back later. So you talk about hegemony, you talk about power and all that. Those are important dynamics to discuss later on. If you introduce those ideas in your literature review and you discuss it, which you did in the beginning, you need to recapture it, tie it back to your conclusion or your discussion there. So you want to make sure you want to introduce great ideas and then suddenly disappear, and you just have simple findings, simple discussion. So you introduce good ideas, you want to bring it back, right? So, oops, sorry. Where else is it? If you have good limitation slides that you have at the end, this good, you should maintain that one.
Okay.
You did talk about that one. You are focusing more on the national or state museums.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Nation.
private museums and there are also private museums.
No. Just nation.
Yes, yes.
National
So
museums.
maybe you want to put that there somewhere too, right?
Oh, okay.
Right. It's one of the limitations.
private. Okay.
There's a lot of private museums. Also, all the commercial museums, mirror museum, whatever. The selfie museum. There's a lot here in Penang too. All this commercial.
Oh my God.
Huh?
There's so culture industry.
There's a culture. There's like yeah. And there's also the religious, the temple museums and all that.
The private museums.
The private, the religious institution museums. I mean, I think there's a Catholic museum, whatever museum
okay.
you belong to.
All right.
It might not be a big museum, but still, if they call it a museum or whatever, it's still. So that is another part that would be interesting to look. But you just say the scope is this, not including that. Right?
Okay.
The other thing that people might get confused, no, people might listen and listen, they might not understand, or they might forget from the focus, is that this is the representation of Malayness or Malay identity in museum, not the actual Malay identity. So that's an important part to remind them.
They will not want to drag me to history.
Don't want to history. So it's good you're doing contemporary. That you're not going to history. Malay is not like this. Malay is not like that. And you do not want to get that to that kind of discussion. You say this is a Malay representation, the representation of Malay identity in the
National Museum.
Yeah. So remind them of that, because it can easily get absorbed in your presentation. They say, "Oh, Malay like this."
I know that.
Yeah, man, don't forget, if you talk about all the Bugis, Java, Minangkabau, we need to include in that, because it's definitely a big part of Malay identities related to Minangkabau.
Because I can argue, Java, nasi ambang is not there.
Oh,
But yeah, if I don't say the representation,
nasi ambang is like nasi tumpang. Nasi ambang is what? Javanese, right? Is it? I don't know. I know nasi tumpeng is Javanese. Nasi ambang, nasi ambang is
tumpang.
nasi tumpeng. It's like this. It's like the cone.
The pyramid.
Nasi
The
tumpang.
yellow rice, right?
Yellow
Yeah,
rice.
and you eat with mee hoon.
Yeah, bihun, chicken, many.
You know that, yeah. That's
Javanese.
Japanese. Yeah. Anyways, there's a certain important point that you want to bring in. So congratulations, you're ready. Yeah, so schedule the appointment, and we'll be listening to your presentation to the committee. Then that's the important part. Just be cautious and committed to the completing your work before the deadlines. That's important. Right.
Bro,
Go ahead. You want to
the
ask a
question I want to ask is, when I read back my literature review, I have a sense that I feel that it is not enough to explain chapter 5. So in this stage, should I add more journals in?
Yes, you could do that. Yes.
Because it is like shaky.
Sure. That's usually that can be the case when you discover new things and the literature doesn't explain anything, right? Yes, you could do. Anyways, sorry, go ahead.
The last one is correct me if I'm wrong. Just now the typology, I can have typology inside chapter analysis chapter. I can have typology in the discussion and conclusion chapter, right?
Yeah, you could have that. But if they ask you to shift, then you shift. It's an issue of where to put it, right? So they have some examiners have different views.
Okay.
If you feel that you need a good chapter to really explain a lot of things, if you can even create another chapter, right? Okay. Anyways, I'd like to listen. Yeah. Anyone else have any inputs or thoughts or comments to share with Zhang? Anyone from the online guys?
Hi. Assalamualaikum. Hi, Chang. Well
Hi.
done. Yeah, I'm looking forward for my time, so I'm still a long way to go. I just wonder because for the Malay myth that you mentioned, whether any of the museums that you had visited or you have just studied mention anything about Bani Jawi, which is like Malays being the progeny from Kantura, which is the lineage or descendants of Abraham. Just a thought, because that will be a strong. I mean, after hearing the discussion between my brother Prof. Arif and yourself, I would think that this you mentioned about the Alexander Iskandar Zulkarnain just now. I would think that the Malays should reorientate their myth / legitimacy towards Banu Kantura, which is like the descendants of Abraham, because in the Quran it mentioned that the descendants of Abraham will one day rise. So that's my small comment. It's almost small comment. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any evidence of that? Discussion of that?
Regard Abang Riza, no, I don't find I don't find on this niche. Sorry to say, in the museum.
All the best to you. It's excellent. I've been making a lot of notes whilst you were making presentation just now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent.
Abang Rizal, but one thing is, in terms, I don't know whether Bugis on the founding myth or one is like it relates to Nabi Sulaiman.
Yeah, correct, correct. Yeah, Bugis, Bugis. The name Bugis comes from Balqis, Balqis or Sheba in the Christian text is or Bible is called Sheba, the Queen of Sheba. So there are stories, there are legends that say that Balqis is actually from Nusantara.
Oh,
So they're from Nusantara. So and it's mentioned in Quran and of course mentioned in Bible as well. So when Sulaiman married Solomon married Sheba or Balqis, yeah, their progenies, their descendants are Bugis.
all right. That
So we have got double double. One is from Allah SWT, one is from descendants of Abraham just now, which is Bani Jawi, yeah, Kantura, and the other one is Sulaiman, which is from Bugis. In fact, they were saying that even Borobudur in Jawa is the remnants from Sulaiman's what you call it temple and all that.
I see. Okay.
It's nothing to prove, but you know there's just a
That's quite a myth in Indonesia, by the way.
I see.
The Sulaiman connection, yeah, and Borobudur and all that. If I'm not mistaken, in Borobudur, there's a museum. You've been to Borobudur yet?
No.
Okay. There's a museum. A lot of people go to Borobudur but do not visit the museum. I visited the museum. The museum is about ships and sailing and maritime.
I will take note there.
So a lot of people go to Borobudur, they don't go to the museum. They just
Yeah,
take
that's
pictures in Borobudur. They don't even know what it means and all that, you know. And then,
I think I can stay there for weeks or months.
yeah. They don't know.
We should go there.
Yeah, and be careful with the tour guides. You know, I
Oh,
went there
yeah.
a couple of times. I get different tour guides. They presented me three different stories. You know, okay. And some of them are historically incorrect, but it's okay.
I'll read their Facebook first. Yeah, konservasi Buddha.
And Borobudur is not well preserved actually because they have destroyed many of the.
Actually,
they
I want to.
put the nails in the stone and all that.
I'm one of the advocates to temporarily close
Yes,
down.
yes. I think that it should be more well preserved. Over here, the World Heritage Site, if you have the chip from the building, right? You cannot do anything. You got to use the same pen. The expert have to come in. You know, over there, see the big chunk. You know, have this big bolt of steel going to it. Should be more well preserved.
Horrified.
Horrified. I was thinking, but well, they know how to take care, but I was quite concerned about how they're taking care of it because Borobudur is a very important site, you know.
I'm worried. I'm really worried.
Yeah, and interesting about Jogja, there's a one straight line, right, from the palace, the Kraton,
Mount Merapi.
straight to Mount Merapi, and in
Exactly.
fact to the sea.
Yeah.
So there's Borobudur, which is Buddhism. There's Prambanan, which is Hinduism, which is another temple, Hinduism.
Yeah.
This is all straight line. Go to the mountain, the volcanic mountain of Merapi, right? And then straight to the sea, which represent another god, the Queen of the South. Gunung Kidul, apa ni? Ratu, apa nama ni? Is the Queen of the South, Ratu Laut Selatan.
Mathematically.
Straight line, yeah, straight line. So it was
Balkis.
Ratu. Oh, maybe Balkis, right? I don't know. Maybe they call it the Queen of the Southern Sea. And if the king of Jogja has a king, when they have parades, there's an empty seat on his side, supposedly for the Queen of the Southern Sea.
Oh, okay.
Supposedly, yeah. So there's a myth. So there's Islam, there's Buddhism, there's Hinduism, and also local.
Okay.
Local, older religion, so to say, the myth of the Southern Sea, the myth of the Queen of the Southern Sea, Ratu Laut Selatan. You know. You're not supposed to wear green.
Oh.
If you're a man, to go there, you will disappear. But yeah, this is And maybe the Ratu has connection with Balkis too. Maybe I don't know. Maybe
Oh,
yeah.
this is how you legit for 1,000 years
Yeah,
civilization.
This is old civilization, right? Very old civilization. It's a straight line. In fact, at the kraton, at the palace, right? There's one place where people get together. There's a tree, pohon alun-alun. tu.
Yeah, alun-alun.
Alun-alun.
In the
where
middle
they-
there's a tree, big
There's
tree.
two trees.
Yeah,
There's two trees. If you walk, if you say we walk in between, you're a
Straight.
straight man. You're an honest guy.
Okay.
Little eye blind, good person.
I want to wondering, Malaysia before Islam come here, what's their religion? They have faith or no?
For Islam, there's Buddhism, there's Hinduism,
In Malaysia, Malay people.
in the whole Malay archipelago, basically. But there's also there's religion before that too, right? So there's discussion on that one too.
This religion can
So the discussion before that is that they believe in one God too, but then there's also talk about shamanism and all that too. So yeah, that yeah, so that's an interesting.
that can be math.
It is myth.
An abstract religion
Yeah.
already gone. I mean,
Yeah.
they don't have faith anymore. Not right now. This
Yeah,
can be math.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So anyone else has any input? I'm giving a lot more time to you, because I haven't seen you for a long, long time.
Yeah, 3 years.
Because you've been detained in North Korea.
Supreme leader Kim Jong Un.
The Supreme Leader loves you so much. Kim Jong Un loves you so much. Yeah. Anyone has any more input? No. Pizarro, you have any input? Any ideas? No. Okay. All right. Okay. If there's none, you want to take a break first, or we can go straight to the next one? Go straight to the next one. I'm ready.
I'm okay.
The other day, the research methodology students said you should take a break for but I'm ready to go.
Maybe 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, make it 3 minutes. Let's go. 3 minutes, we'll come back, right? 3 minutes become 5 minutes.
Oh,
right?
this is
Oh, by the way, everyone, this is an excellent book.
You
know,
social research.
This is Norman Blakey book, one of the top 10 methodologies in the world.
top 10 methodology.
Yes. You go to Sage handbook on methodology. Norman Blakey is in it. Design news. This is from USM or what?
Utah.
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 You forced Utah to buy.
Uh,
So Chang is from Utah, University Tengku
Abdul Rahman.
Abdul Rahman. Okay.
KL.
Kampa, near Ipoh.
Oh.
45 km from Ipoh.
The main campus is in
That's good.
KL, right?
Yeah, Sungai Long.
Yeah.
You have a lot for your friends too.
So Kampa area we have a lot of Mandailing
Norman,
people.
if you want to.
Orang Rawa and Mandailing.
Okay.
Tell him.
I need to
Yeah, it's a small town.
with the publisher.
Sure, I've talked to him. Muhtadi said he's interested to translate, but I can talk to Norman Blakey to translate. I think that will be of help to translate.
Oh, to translate into Bahasa.
To Arabic.
Oh, Arabic.
So I'll speak with him and
Because this is strategy.
yes.
I
It's
didn't-
designing
I
actual.
didn't find strategy list for strategy in Arabic.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was theory.
All right.
Eugene, the Japanese occupation, it is
No, I totally understand. I totally understand. Just because in that period, the as a colony of the Japanese is just the period is quite short, and for that sometimes you just don't take it as replacements of the British. Just because sometimes you can consider them to kind of saviors to save you guys from the colonies of the British, and as the propaganda by the imperial Japanese, they said they are the liberator of all the Asians. But sometimes it just could be some kind of myth.
It is. I mean,
Sometimes a joke like that.
now, to Malaysians, right?
Yeah,
The
so-
worst
so-
colonizers are the Japanese.
Yeah.
They're the most cruel of all.
Yeah.
And in fact, the Japanese was even worse to the Chinese in Malaysia.
Yeah.
because they link it to China, right? They're the worst. They kill. They're violent. They would have all kind of torture.
But for the Japanese, they just want to use some kind of policy to enhance the social status of the Malays and and encourage them to against the Chinese in Malaysia, and at that time to somehow to strike strike the courage to fight against the Japanese.
Yeah. But we all hate them. We all hate them. But interestingly, I think it's true to a lot of Asian countries. We do not. The historical hatred doesn't translate into contemporary hatred. Right? We don't.
So sometimes, as you talking about the anti-colony, this kind of a period, this historical retell in the National Museum, it's just as we do, as Chinese, as China they do, just to remind the people the period to the war against the Japanese invasion.
I know you have Shanghai 第四仓库, the standing ground of the National Army that fight until the end.
Yeah. So, all the museum at this time they want to try to enhance some like Chinese identity, national identity.
That's actually an argument also in terms on Malay nationalism, radical Malay nationalism. Certain groups on propaganda. I'm not saying they believe until the end. The propaganda of Japanese army is like TikTok nowadays. So it's very strong. Until the Malays believe it, and the rise of Malay nationalism has something to do with Japanese occupation.
Yes.
In Indonesia, you try to arm as a reserve navy the Heiho Laut or actually arm the Indonesia. So there's an uprising after that. But Japanese occupation until 8 months or 9 months, Malay community knows that that's another form of colonization we same to the British as well.
That's true.
That's some argument of this.
So you could say at that time they just do the proceeds or practice the colony use the ideology way, that like starting a war or maybe occupy the territory. But today they just start this kind of colony use the economical ways.
Yeah. Okay, ready? All right. Okay. Ready for the next one. Highlight.
Hanif, thanks.
Okay.
No, it depends on
Okay.
Wherever you're comfortable with.
Okay, let's begin. So, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, I'm so appreciate that dear Professor gave me this opportunity to introduce my unwrapped research proposal. So, I would like to research. It's a study on the relationship between the social e-commerce customer cognition and behavior of the corporate social responsibility. So, next page. So I don't have so many information, just the background introduction, theory foundation, the research objective, and the questions and the methodology. And fourthly, I put a case study in the background because it's a trigger of my research. And Erke is a Chinese brand, just like Nike and Adidas. It's a manufacturer, produce the shoes. It used to be a hottest issue at time. Some friends from China must have heard of it. In July 2021, there was a flood in China. And at that time, Erke donated 50 million yuan to this region. And in fact, in that time, the company is almost bankrupt. So the interesting thing is, the netizens showed great and support on the brand on Weibo. So it's explained, and in their live streams, after these hot issues, in just 3 days, its sales volume has exceeded the total sales volume in the first half of the year. On that day, there was 52 times higher than a year-on basis, exceeding the 77 million yuan. So it almost saved the company, and we can see the Baidu intact, and the searching frequencies of Arke, the word, and in almost 3 days, the company is just recovered. Because in that time, the company is almost bankrupted, and he donated all his currency to the flood. So I just realized it was interesting that it's a behavior of donating. It's with a behavior of the CSR. It could can save a company at the time because it's in the modern time with the repeat development of the internet. It could happen today. So I start my research. Firstly, the social e-commerce refers to the business activities that utilize the social network service platform, our applications. And by the way, based on the latest data, according to the news, that is the number one downloads application means timer. The timer. It become the last month. It become the number one downloads both in the Android and the iOS in many countries. For example, the United States. So, as a novel paradigm illustration, social value derived from the network civilization, social e-commerce is one of the most preeminent frontiers issues in business change and digital commerce, which is viewed as a key driver of future business and economic growth. Along with the continued development of social software and mobile payment technology, that's why the foundation. Because the development, it could be happen. Social e-commerce, it becomes the most prevalent form of online commerce. Next page. And so about the CSR. The relationship between the consumers and the CSR has always been controversial because I found many different research where some studies have indicated that consumers are more aware of and interested in CSR, but I realized some empirical studies have concluded that CSR has no effect on consumers' purchasing decisions. So I found totally different two parts of the literature review about this part. So, despite the importance of CSR as expressed in service, there are discrepancies between the consumer CSR and their actual consumer behavior, according to some research. For example, sometimes if you ask clients, so do you think the CSR is important, especially in some aspect? They just told me, yes, I think it's important, but it do not happen to found in their behaviors, and especially in the social e-commerce, the behavior is just like you sharing the link to your friends, you buying the fruit, just like the case you buy the shoes to support the company. So based the literature review shows the next page. So the CSR initiatives are increasingly utilized to influence companies and consumers and differentiate the product offerings because the growing body of research demonstrates that consumers not only punish companies that are not socially responsible, but also rewards those who engage in CS activity. So I do a lot of literature review. I found the relationship between the various aspects of CSR and the consumer response has been studied by the academics, such as the consumer quality perspection, the consumer trust, the consumer loyalty behaviors, and the buying behaviors, and the perceived CSR, and the consumer's behaviors. It's all from the literature review. Next page. So when I use the WOS engine, I search the CSR and the social e-commerce. I just realized almost the vast majority, maybe 80 or 90% is in China, the pioneer in social e-commerce. So I think it's the biggest market is in China. So I think it's some research gap that I could research in different areas, different countries. So, and secondly, compared to traditional custom market, the consumer behavior of consumers in social e-commerce, including the purchase of points, has changed considerably, and the information and dissemination and the consumption behaviors can occur almost at the same time. So so the behavior and the decision can be the same time because of the internet. So this is so I think it's an excellent opportunity to emulate the imbalance between the consumer's perception and the CSR practices. And many current research examine the relationship between the different consumer factors and CSR as a whole. Meanwhile, there's a little research on relationship between the social e-commerce and CSR, and I want to find more details and aspects in CSR for research. And the last one, the research will provide a sufficient empirical evidence to inform the future studies and business practice. So next page. Oh, so it's very classical theory foundation about CSR. One is stakeholder theory, and another triple bottom line. I will use this classical theory to next page. It's too classical to explain, I think. So I also want to introduce some consumer psychology theory into my research because I think those theory is very powerful to explain the reasons. The first is I just chose two theories, and the first is the cognition dissonance theory, and another is the attribute theory. And I want to explain at this page. Next. So the research objective and questions. Just to list the questions I want to research, but I think I need all my friends to help me to clarify the real research questions. The first, how do social e-commerce consumers perceive the CSR, their attitude? Secondly, do social e-commerce consumers consider CSR behaviors when purchasing goods or services? The third one is what is the impact of social e-commerce consumers' cognitive level on their purchasing behavior? And third, how do social e-commerce consumers trust and some influence affect their purchasing behavior? The last one is there a difference between the different countries? So in the survey, I would like to choose some different countries for the same questionnaire to collect data. And the last page is about psychology. And if, to be honest, I want to use a quantitative questionnaire to collect data. I will to based on the theory and the objective. So I want to use statistical analysis and the system analysis method and some case studies. So that's all.
So,
Yes.
okay, all right. Where's your thank? Oh, there are references. Oh. Okay. Okay.
Stand here is very nervous.
Very nervous. That's
I
good.
just
That's good.
that's my tongue is not
Okay.
okay.
All right. That's the whole idea that to go through this process that even though you're nervous, you're still able to present. You know. That's the whole idea.
That's right.
If as I said just now, the anxiety will probably continue even until, especially probably, till Viva. But besides the anxiety, you still want to be able to present and make your case.
Okay.
All right, this is the very first draft, right? The whole idea is to develop it into your research methodology, research proposal, right? So you want to think along those lines right now. Okay, let me go straight to your, before I comment the rest of things, I'll go straight to your research questions.
Research question.
Yeah. Can you enlarge it, Hanif? Make it, maybe that one again. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So, I just share quickly. Okay. So you have how do social e-commerce consumers perceive CSR? So, to relate back to your point just now being that social e-commerce research is limited to only to China so far, as you said, 80% of the studies or 80% of the hits are from China, right? So the uniqueness is the social e-commerce part, right? Because CSR, people have been studying CSR for quite a bit right now. Right? But social e-commerce is the one that is novel, new here. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
a novel. Yes.
It's a novel. It's something new here. Yeah. First is how do social e-commerce consumers perceive CSR? Do social e-commerce consumers consider CSR behaviors when purchasing goods or services? What is the impact of social e-commerce consumers' cognitive level on their purchasing behavior? How do social e-commerce consumers trust and social influence affect their purchasing behavior? Okay, so here the focus is on the consumers.
The consumer. Right.
So the focus is on the consumers, and you want to do case study. Am I right? No?
The questionnaire.
Questionnaire?
I want to. The questions is to design some question on a questionnaire to ask the consumers.
Okay.
So the almost the full question is I want them to answer me. I just
Okay.
to collect some data from them.
From questionnaire.
Yes.
Are you asking general questions on just any company CSR or something specific companies? Just now you gave the example of Urker,
Yes.
right? Urker company, right? But here you're asking a general question,
General
right?
question.
Right? So perception of CSR, generally speaking. Alright. Yeah? Is that what you're asking now? I'm just questioning now. I'm not I'm not arguing, I'm just asking. Right. Is that what you're asking? So it's a general CSR question. Right? How do they perceive?
Generally question.
Am I right there? Yeah? You're not sure or you're thinking?
I'm thinking.
You're thinking, okay. or you want to differentiate between different CSR companies, companies from different sectors. There's an oil company, there's a plastic company, there's shoe company, you know what I mean? So manufacturing, electronics, you want to do that, or you want to?
That's different.
That's different, of course, right? Because CSR can be, any CSR. So now my take on this is this one. This is a PhD level, all right? PhD level research. So theoretical contribution is utmost important. It's very, very crucial, very important. So I'm not sure whether there's a lack in previous studies on social e-commerce, consumers, and CSR. I'm guessing there might be some studies already. Right? I might be wrong, but you got to show.
Yes, I know there's some different research, but there have some studies argued it is yes, and some others is no.
Social e-commerce.
Yes.
Studies on social e-commerce.
Okay. Not social e-commerce, just the e-commerce.
E-commerce.
Yes.
Okay.
E-commerce. I found many reviews of the studies of the commerce, our e-commerce.
E-commerce, not
social e-commerce is new.
It's new. So there's not much in the literature on this one yet.
Yes.
Okay. So what your task is also to differentiate e-commerce and social e-commerce.
Oh.
Right? You do differentiate that, and why your research on social e-commerce is different from e-commerce research, right? So within that background, within that discussion, you will say why is it important to study social e-commerce, right? Now, my take on this one is it is a bit shallow at this point, not deep enough, not deep enough, not deep enough. So that because you're asking a very general question, right?
That's question.
So the general question. So you can ask a general question, but you want to go more specific than that, so that it helps you in building more richer data, right? Not data that's limited. This can be quite limited data. Then you have problem with having a thin thesis instead of thick thesis, right? Okay. So you think, as I said just now, maybe you want to differentiate first. You want to argue, reason out why social e-commerce is an important sector, important sphere of study vis-a-vis CSR, which you kind of make just now, right? So you can make that, and then you want to deepen your research to make it more PhD worthy. I said maybe you want to look at different types of companies CSR. So they might have different views of milk companies in China, right? They might have different views of
to choose one type of the companies and focus on.
If you want to go focus, you want to go really deep. Right? You want really, you can do that, which is fine as well. You can do that, or you can do comparative perception of companies CSR. So like just now, one is milk, the other one is what is a favorable company in China? Weibo. What is a company that people like?
Like a Facebook.
Like Facebook. The company that I'm asking you, a company that Chinese in China like. Is there one?
No, it's just a platform that can everybody should.
Okay. Basically, I'm giving you some ideas of how you can find the types of company. Types of companies. Yeah. I'll give you an example of milk company, because milk company has, I think 10, 15 years ago has a bad reputation, right? We put melamine in the milk, right, and then kill some babies in the process. But then good thing about the Chinese government, they executed the people, right?
No.
They didn't execute the people.
Just suspended their qualification to enter into this industry.
Oh, I thought they executed now. You sure they're
No,
not executed?
the company were just broken and they reformed a new company.
All right. Okay. Okay. Right. So, that's one way to look at a likable company, not a company that people do not like. Company that people you can do that, or you can think about manufacturing company versus service company versus financial company. Think about that. Or you want to go deep into one type of company, then differentiate within that type of company. Manufacturing, electronic, electrical, furniture. You can so you become an expert in a particular area. Yeah, so PhD is about focusing and then go deep
One thing,
and go deeper in that. Yes, but if you want to do wide, then you need to do a good comparative study of wide areas, right? So, but then you got to uh, be able to show good data, rich data of this, of what you're researching. So think more deeply about the type or how you want to classify the companies. So right. So when you ask consumers, they have an idea, right? In the U.S., there are very critical of timber company, oil companies, right? But they might like ice cream companies or something like that, right? Maybe. So you think about that, there will be one different ways of organizing the companies, or you can think of small companies, big companies, or you can think of state-run companies, private companies. Think about that. So and then underlying that, you will need to bring it back to your problem statement. Why you want to do such comparison or deep analysis of that, right? So, in fact, the deeper you go, the less likely the area will be researched on by other people because you'll go deeper and deeper and deeper, right? Right. So,
narrow.
more narrow, yeah. You can even talk about areas, right? The northern companies, the central companies, the southern companies. Or you can think of ethnic companies. I'm not sure you have ethnic companies, right? It'd be interesting too. So, if your research, if I may take the example of Tujia, right? A Tujia company, maybe, or a geography is the geography of a particular ethnic community, right? Now, that you can have different ways of analyzing it. So it's not just a general thing like this. So because you're bringing it to the PhD level, right? So you want to make it more meaningful, more richer, right? Now, my concern is the data that you get, right? So I would encourage you. Now, you do not have to take my idea on this one, but I encourage you to have a qualitative part to this. Qualitative part to this. So you have the quantitative and you have the qualitative. Quantitative first and then qualitative. So that will make it what is it? Explanatory research, explanatory sequential research, quantitative and qualitative. You have the data, you let them explain why you like this. Right? So you get why do you like this kind of company? Why? You know what I mean?
So the qualitative first, and then the quantitative.
Qualitative later. They explain later. Quantitative first, qualitative later. Right? Because you want to capture the quantitative, right? So again, if you want to look at the second question now, social e-commerce consumers consider CSR behaviors when purchasing goods. What type of behaviors, right? So, there's CSR for the workplace. Do they take care of their employees well? Do they exploit the employees?
So that's one aspect.
That's one aspect. The other one is environmental. The other one is community, for instance. The other one is their product itself. Is it safe? Is it good for people? Whatever. So you can look at social. Consider what aspects of CSR behaviors. So you see you have a data set that is richer there. So that is another. Yeah, you see what I'm saying now. So you have your PhD becomes much more deeper or wider and more meaningful there, right? And then you ask them why do you like companies that treat the employees well? Get them to explain. Or they say, I don't care how they treat their companies as long as the product is good, I'm okay. Which is generally the reason. Consumers are mostly like that, right? Get them to explain. Get them to explain. Right? So from you have qualitative data to support you too. Yeah. Now my concern is this: if you have quality data to support to explain the quantitative data, sometimes, not sometimes, many times, most of the times, if it's questionnaire, right? People do not really answer. They have blanks in answer, or they answer like 3 words. They answer like 5 words, right? So you cannot really use it to explain things, right? Amen. So then you have problem with that. Okay. Now I just want to tell you all these issues, not to complicate it, but it is complex, right? So another way to think about this is to give their answers and then take the answers, right? Then before you come up with the answers, then they take the answers, right? But of course, you can still have the qualitative part. You got to think about the theory because you're doing a deductive research right now, right? Why people choose to support companies with good environmental CSR behaviors? There are theories about this. There are explanations about this. You take the explanation. Explanation 1, explanation 2, explanation 3, right? So A from explanation 1, hypothesis 1, hypothesis 2, hypothesis 3 there. You see the reasoning now? This is deductive. So deductive is theory, hypothesis, and then you go and collect data from hypothesis. See? So you will need to have theory in your questions, right? So there's even question number 1 you can expand it. Question number 2 you can even expand it further, right? So there are different types of CSR behavior. So the example, the number 1 just now you're talking about a company occurs just now that give 5 million to help people some tragedy, right? Some not sure. 50 million is for who? The company you explained just now, Urker. What is that money for? 50 million that they give?
Donating.
Donation for what?
Donation for flood.
Flood. So CSR behavior is donation for flood victims, donation for community. For instance, give an example, flood victims. Right. See, yeah. So when they ask if people support that kind of company, that kind of behavior, you ask, why do you support that kind of behavior? Right? So yeah, then you have 1 or 3 or 4 explanation. And then you have the qualitative part too. Right? But you got to use theory or previous studies to come up with the categories of answers. Right? So that later on you can link the findings with the theory back. Is it supporting the theory? Is it challenging the theory? Is it negating the theory? Is it expanding the theory? You know what I mean? Yeah? Okay. Now, eventually from here, since if you are doing quantitative, you want to have a theoretical framework or a conceptual framework for your study. So this one can be expanded. Companies, you show arrow the companies, you show what is your conceptual framework, right? You see your point now? Conceptual framework. That is, eventually you will turn it into conceptual framework. Is this helping you? Yeah, to expand your. Otherwise, it'll be very straightforward. You might have problem with data. Right? So by doing this, you might have less problem with that. Now, if you want to have qualitative data to support you further, you could have other types of methods, right? It need not be questionnaire. You can have questionnaire just now. They will answer. Maybe some will answer 3 words, 5 words. Maybe some will have, out of them, maybe out of 50, maybe 5 will answer longer sentence, maybe. Right? You could have a more in-depth analysis if you have richer qualitative data. How? By doing interviews, by doing focus group study, right? But you have a challenge. If you're here, it's a bit hard to do it over there. But you won't be here for long. You can go back and do field research, right? So you can have focus group discussion to get qualitative data. You can have in-depth interview to have quality data. In which case, you will also need to have research design. But how are you developing the focus group discussion? Who are represented? Who do you get people in, right? Or in-depth interview, are you doing random? Are you doing purposive? You can have that. So that way, that will enrich your data, enrich your findings. And the qualitative can help corroborate, support your quantitative data, right? So that is my input for you. I won't go to the other aspects. But if you have theory, you've got to link it to your methodology where you have the research questions and the hypothesis in the research questionnaire, right? So you want to have that. So you want to show that there's a connection between the theory that you are using and how you're applying it. Okay. Now, are you limited to the theories? No, you are not limited to the theories that are given out there, right? But if you want to introduce a new thing, you need to have a discussion why you're introducing a new variable, right? So now your framework will need to show independent and dependent variable, qualitative, quantitative, deductive research, right? So you have independent, you have dependent. What is the independent variable? What is the dependent variable? Right? So this will come from theories and studies before that, right? So there are a lot of studies on CSR already, so you could use them, right? On loyalty, on whatever, right? So you can use them, right? But you got to connect them because at the end, after you have carried out your research, you have your findings. You want to talk about the implication of your findings to the theory, right? How is this contributing to the theory? Right? Okay.
I mean, in some studies, they just choose one aspect and CSR.
Yes.
They publish that paper.
Yes,
And
yes.
another publish paper.
Yes, yes.
So
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else want to share anything with Kyla? Have some thoughts?
Some suggestions. And inputs.
Thank you, Kalai. I'm Livia here.
Who's that?
Yeah, I'm Livia here.
Is it
Could you hear me? Could you hear me? Yeah. I'm Livia. Could you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Kalai. It's a wonderful presentation for the first time. It's I know that you are very nervous because I can see you from the screen, and I found that you really feel nervous before your presentation, especially after the end of the first presentation. You're really nervous. You are waiting for your presentation, but it's really a successful presentation. I have a question that. I think this topic is very meaningful in China because, as we all know, that China is a developing country. But if we are talking about the aspect of the electricity commerce, maybe it's a developed country. I even couldn't remember that. What's the latest?
Electricity.
Yeah, because as most of the Chinese people now are shopping online, especially among the youngs and including you and me. But I have a question that what's the object of your research? Because as we all know that now many of the online shops actually they are not the enterprise. There are only one or two people just selling the things online. So it's not a enterprise. But I think it's really important for us to how to say. So what's your object of your research? How to make the difference between the online shops and the enterprise?
Online shop enterprise.
Yeah.
So in fact, in my research proposal, I would like to study the relationship is particular. For example, in the first case, I want to for example, the definition, the people's behavior, like the sharing the link, the buying, that's all the behavior. So I want to research which aspect of CSR, such as the donating, will good to the will make people more behaviors for this behavior. Right.
You want to say which CSR behavior influences
Yes,
consumers purchasing? Yeah, is that the one, right?
Yes, yes.
I got that. Yeah, we are talking about the CRS. So CRA, when we talk about the CRS, sorry, CSR. When we are talking about the CSR, actually we are talking about the actions of the enterprises, right? Yeah, but now in China, there are many kinds of enterprises. Now we are talking about the e-commerce, and we are doing the action of e-commerce. As we all know that there's many shops online, but actually in China, some of the shops are not actually the enterprises. Maybe in these shops, there are only one or two people just doing the action of selling things online.
Yes,
So
so I just read. So back to my case, it's about the brand, the manufacturer. So no matter which shop you buy the shoes, it was the article. So I just want to study the consumers cognition. So the attitude of CSR of the brand and the manufacturer behind the brand.
So you're interested to look at the car, not the company not the people that is online selling the car, or the shoes, not the people selling the shoes necessarily, right? Not now. What Li is saying is that many enterprises now are just run by 2 or 3 persons because it's online.
yeah.
Right. So you are interested to look at the manufacturer of
Yes,
the product.
the big company.
The big company. So
Yes,
so there's an important point Lee is saying. So in your sampling of companies, right, you should choose that type of company, not the what 2 or 3 person company.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? And then this is a good point also Leah is raising, that since you're doing a social e-commerce company, so that is the tricky part, because a lot of these social e-commerce company, I do not know, right, might not have a lot of people in it. So you are studying the social e-commerce company, or you're studying the manufacturing. So that's the question. So you need to
Choose one type.
One type.
Companies.
Yeah.
Right.
So for instance, I'm not, car company is not social e-commerce company, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it? No, it's not. Car is not social e-commerce, right? Maybe what? Yeah. Camera, maybe this camera e-commerce. I don't know. So you need to identify between the manufacturer or the social e-commerce.
Yeah, the definition is very important. Maybe it's better to give a definition of the research object before I was starting your research.
Yeah, good point there. And to relate to what you're saying, that's about cognition, right? The other part of your research where you can slice it differently, right, is the sampling. Maybe you want to look at the youth. The other one you compare to, youth, you can separate the youth, man. The millennial, the Gen Z, right? You can do a comparative thing. Maybe if you want to focus on the youth, there'd be another way to slice it, compare the youth, or between the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. You can compare it because their cognition might be different too, right? People or married people with non-married people. Maybe people like Raji and non-Raji. So I mean, the sample be good to you know, a good way to focus your research on. So your research, if you do youth, you can put youth in your title there. The youth perception, you know, if you do youth, or the rural communities perception, you could do that too, right? Or the urban youth, you can do that too, right? So you're slicing it. So when you slice it further and further, you become the expert in the area, right? The urban poor youth. There you go. So you have the urban. You can write about the urban. You can write about the work youth. You can write about poor consumers, right? Or working income consumers. So you can can go deep that way. You can so your your research become much more novel, more original that way, right? So just now the point I pointed out just now is the types of company and then the types of behaviors and then the type of consumers. Right? So there are many ways to slice this, many ways to cut the
Variable.
variables. Yeah. So that will be another fascinating thing, to look at youth. For instance, if you are interested in that, right? But then the youth, there's a difference between the millennial and the Gen Z, right? The Gen Z, right? That'd be another way to look at it. So think more deeply about this. But since you're interested in cognition, which I captured from what you said, so you're interested in cognition of somebody there, who, right? And China is so big, man. You got to think about. you got to think more specific. China is so huge, right? Think more specific, but and you could be the expert in that particular group of people, right? Or
Yeah, Professor, thank you for your explanation for me. Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry.
your-
Go ahead. Go ahead. Anyone else wants to?
eh,
Or, for instance, the group can be NGO youth, the green people, whatever, environmental group people. So, how are they? How are they doing? How the CSI influencing the environmentally conscious people? So you're already selecting a group.
Things focus on one small field issue.
Yes. But small in China is big. No matter how you slice in China, it's still big. It's like but that's something good, because the sampling is a way to develop good theorizing, because not many people have studied everyone in every single way. So you can slice it very nicely and look at that growing people. You can even study the elites. The elites, right? The well-to-do children, family, whatever. Be another group, and I think a lot of companies will be interested in your study on that one. The elites, or the university graduates, right? Could do that too. But then you differentiate the different university graduates between what group further, right? So there's could do millennium, university graduates, urban, you see me? Yeah. So you become clearer and clearer. That's what PhD is about, becoming clearer, deeper, and eventually you own a space. You own that space, you're an authority on that because you author that area. What I mean? Anyone else has any inputs? So as I said just now, you need to think about dependent variable, the theory, the hypothesis, right? And the variables must come from theories or hypotheses that you have studied. And then eventually you need to have that conceptual framework, right? And then adding to that is the qualitative data, right? It could be from in-depth interview or from focus group discussion. And I think my final input is access the data. Think about access the data. How are you going to access the data? Who are you going to interview? How are you going to interview them? Right? a big example, last time, Taufan, a student of mine from Jakarta, he wants to study youth leaders, right? Youth leaders. So I said, okay, you want to do youth leaders? Is it from, Sumatra, Aceh, up to, the Kalimantan youth? Indonesia is still a very, very huge country, right? Almost 270, 280 million. All which,
So the interviews are encouraging.
so when we keep on zooming, right? I said, well, no, just Java Island and Sumatra. Okay, Java Island is still big, right? I said, oh, I'm going to interview. So eventually it zoomed down to urban youth. Yes, because he has access to them. Access to urban youth leaders. Right? Eventually he developed policies at the end. So access is extremely important because if you don't have access, you have problems. Right? So think about access. Right? Some people after a year, 2 years, they can't access. They have access. They have to redo their work. And companies are nasty animals. They do not want to give access. But then you are interviewing the consumers, not the companies. But the companies they are like CIA, FBI, Mossad. They do not want to tell you their secrets, right? Until somebody leaked, right? That is my input because this is at this stage. But it's good that the whole idea is do not wait until 3/4 of your journey and then you want to make corrections. The more you present to me, the faster you can make your corrections, right? Correcting your direction, right? So rather than later. So do not wait until it's perfect. It is not perfect. Even until you completed your PhD, it's still not perfect, right? And don't worry about the title. The title, whatever title that you do right now, at the end, during the Viva, when you leave the Viva, the examiners will sit down together, with me too, with the examiner. Okay, what do you think of the title? How should we change the title? They will tell you what the title is. so that's but then after your PhD, it's like you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. But if you learn karate, you cannot bring in Wing Chun in your karate, right? You cannot bring Yong Chun Chuan into your karate training. You got to do karate, right? If you bring in somebody thing into it, then they will say, "Oh no, you disqualify." Right? So karate is karate, PhD is PhD. Right? So after that, you can do. And the approach that we are taking is that you want to go in strong, you want to go in solid, you win, and then you go, and then you submit, right? That's why I'm suggesting to you the qualitative data part, right? To get more than enough information data. Yeah? I'm concerned about quantitative that doesn't have enough data. Then they have a problem with that. Yeah? So you want to go in strong. You have like 6-7 weapons. You go in, yeah. So you can fight with different weapons, like John Wick. Anyone watch John Wick yet?
Yeah.
You watch it? I haven't watched it.
The full, I didn't watch.
You didn't watch it? I didn't watch it.
Three parts, I think.
Huh?
3 parts?
This fourth one. There's a fourth John Wick now. Yes.
Yeah.
The movie.
Yeah,
is
sure.
out.
Yeah,
Yes,
true.
Wow.
Recently, we were just
Great.
on the same.
Don't know.
Haven't watched it. My son wants to watch it together with me. I said, it's 18. You cannot go in and watch. Okay. Anyone have any questions you want to ask me or?
That's
Okay, for now, all right. All right, congratulations, you make that one. Then maybe the next time will be Hanif and one goal. Maybe not next time, but next time after
Raya.
After Raya.
yeah. But don't worry, it's okay. It gets you thinking about your work. That's all. Yeah, it gets you thinking, and the practice of presenting. Yeah.
too nervous to speak. Just like a little more.
Yes, and we are all English is not our mother tongue, right? It's our second, third language or something, right? So
You remember me when we meet with you first time?
yeah. I remember that. Yes. But you have improved a lot. Yeah. So over here, when you have a chance, even among your Chinese, Malaysian Chinese, use English.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm here to speak English.
Good
I speak
opportunity
English.
here
Yeah, I speak
to
English.
learn English.
It's not perfect, but it helps. You know?
Yeah,
It helps. Yeah.
Yeah.
My student who was fastest in doing her masters, her name is Tiao from China. She started, again, her English wasn't so good, and she improved English dramatically. Plus, she has several boyfriends, but it's another. That's another story.
That's personal. We don't care about that. We don't care about that.
No, but international boyfriends,
Yeah.
Arab boyfriends too. So she keeps on coming. She's one case where the supervisor runs from the student. Because I cannot see you every day. Okay, she keeps on seeing me like twice, 3 times a week. Okay, Tiana, you're gonna do this. I'm gonna see you every day. So very diligent, very hardworking. She's from Tianjin. So I met her father as well. Now that her father.
Yeah, I remember when I come here to Malaysia, my admission with condition, I should bring IELTS 5 degree. Remember, Victor? Yeah. So I stayed here 8 months to just study English.
Yeah.
And I examined twice IELTS. First time I get 4.5. Yeah. And the IBS don't accept me. Just half degree. Yeah. And I have to do again the exam. Yeah. After 2 months I did the exam again. I get 5. 2020 September.
Amazing, it's good. And then you also speak Bahasa as well.
Also I do bahasa. Now I say boleh cakap bahasa.
In fact, in the abstract, I got 6.5 in reading, but only 6 in speaking,
Okay.
and 5 in listening.
In listening 5, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So in most occasion, if you give me a paper, I can read, I can know what I talk about.
Yes.
But if I'm talking or in a discussion, I'm just something I'm considering what that means.
Yes. Yeah. You're interpreting in your mind first, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's why maybe Wan Kun, you can share some your tips to your English.
Yeah.
You seem to be.
You can give them the email of Mr. Lance.
What's that?
Mr. Lance, I told you before.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You can share that again with.
Now I with his session every Thursday.
Every Thursday.
Every Thursday.
Every class.
Yeah, with the class, Mr. Lance. Me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay, well, it's 10 minutes to 6 right now. I will meet you all again after the Idul Fitri. Over here we call it Hari Raya, which means big day. Raya is big. Hari is day. So
Is that on vacation?
I'll be on vacation. Be back not this week after next. Right? I'll be back. Yeah.
How about me, Victor?
What's that?
How about me?
And I think you can come back. You can schedule for committee presentation.
Can I submit? You see?
Yes, I see. Can present.
Okay.
Can you present?
Okay, so I will submit to the Madame Roshima.
Yes.
PowerPoint and these pieces, or just PowerPoint?
PowerPoint will be enough.
Just PowerPoint enough.
PowerPoint is enough.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow, congratulations. Thank you.
Yeah. Each step is a congratulation, not just a small step. All right. Thank you so much, Hanif, for helping. Also, Hanif become the new Chief Technology CTO. You guys know OBS? Familiar with OBS? Online Broadcasting System. That's what Hanif is doing. That's what Rajan is doing. OBS is a system that can capture anything online and reorganize it into combine it with different videos